capitalism, all of the gains in automation, it goes to the owner class. All you have to do is have everyone be an owner, and now suddenly any gain in automation is a gain for everybody. If you grow just one thing, it may not grow as well as if it grows with another thing. A good example of that is called the Three Sisters method of farming.
There is definitely multi-apartment buildings or multi-families that do passive design.
$100 million that they gave to Joe Rogan that they would kind of be out if they breach contract. Is that a bigger number? Or is 2 billion a bigger number?
I don't know, Zach.
It's a tough one. I know.
Really hard.
And maybe comparing numbers is not Jeremy's strong suit. Gotta go kill a Jenny.
I still don't think you should kill her. I don't think it's a good idea.
It's a ghost, dude. Welcome back, everybody, to Bread Theory. Tonight we're going to be doing kind of a more, I wouldn't call it like a grab bag, but we're going to be doing a bunch of different things, covering a bunch of different topics with Dan Plaat of the Three Left Show. Also, what's left in Albany or what's left Albany? In Albany. Okay.
In Albany, yeah. You got it.
Nice.
I know that doesn't work. What's left Albany? What's left Albany? I mean, I guess I considered that.
Yeah, it could be like what's left, Albany.
Yeah. I'm bouncing around. Well, I made one draft logo.
Cool.
And I'll make a new one that's probably will read better. Yeah. Basically, we have this local landmark, which is on the RNC corporate building. There is this big dog, and it's nicknamed Nipper. And so I have Nipper holding a red flag as a logo, but the other thing is to take a beaver. And since when I put in cartoon beaver, some of them actually have a worker's helmet on, or they're carrying a piece of wood.
Nice.
So it's like, okay, I'll have a worker beaver holding
there you go,
or a flag. So
I
think I'll probably go with that. That'll read better. But unfortunately, the cartoon beavers, just none of them kind of look right to me. They don't have the right style. But maybe I'll have to go deeper. So otherwise, how are you? Everything's good on my end for the most part.
That's good. Yeah, I'm doing well. My wife and I are still looking for a house. We're getting kind of towards the finish line. Gotta clear up some stuff with credit.
You mentioned the credit rating, the authoritarian system of social credit.
And it's such a joke too. Rating. Like we talked with this mortgage lender, and he's like, here's a list of things. We need you to get this credit card down to $49 and this credit card down to $11. And that's going to be optimum credit. Because you have to have some credit. You can't completely pay off all your stuff.
Yes.
Otherwise, your credit rating goes
down.
He's
making the positive suggestion of, look, have the minimum amount that you can in these accounts. So you have them on the books, but you're not actually owing anything. Yeah. Because that happened where I just saw someone say, like, I paid off a credit card and my credit rating went down. And then I have the company saying, oh, you shouldn't have paid that off. And the best advice is to never take out any credit cards or start that whatsoever, which I really want to punch my family because they basically pressured me into getting a Home Depot credit card. And of course, I got a credit rating as soon as it's on the statement. So at least I have that on hand. But now that's there, and I didn't want it to be, but I think eventually I get discounts, or when my dad had $800, like that was not on the card as debt, but as far as you get $800 because of so much use or whatever, or points, whatever it was. So so I wanted to start with the thing I've been listening to all week, which is the revelations, the truth, the intervention by members of Center for Political Innovation, basically expelling Caleb Maupin. He's gone quiet, and there's much to speculate on. But what can't be speculated on is that he is a complete freak, sex pest, and the rest, and a just totally exploited person. And there's various comments I want to be on. I listened to the whole article. It's very long, but it's because they have a lot of people making statements that collaborate each other is simply the right way of accusing someone of something. This is usually the kind of investigation that occurs after an accusation's been made, and you actually have a committee that's like, okay, we'll investigate this before taking action. But maybe that's what's been happening the last year or however long.
Yeah, it's hard to know how the wheels and gears have been turning to bring this to light at this time. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't have a hugely high opinion of the CPI, so it also wouldn't surprise me if this just was either brought to their attention and swept under the rug for this long, or they were just completely oblivious to what's going on.
So I think but what I want to point out is that because of the social media presence and the way that if Caleb Maupin did anything right, it was the fact that he did get, he became, what's it called when, not that he just went viral, but like he got connected into online spaces in a way that he got known by us, by schmoes like us.
Yeah.
That his cloistered, cult that calls itself leftist, or at least nominally, at least the people in it have leftist politics, but they've been snookered or tricked basically into doing a project that isn't actually where the project enriches the leader, is what it comes down to. And there's a lot of leftist groups or groups made up of leftist people where they actually are just cliques of 10 people. And the project isn't maybe enriching one person, but maybe collecting social capital or loyalty for the clique leader, who doesn't have to be a cult leader, but just be the person who's underlining things, or
right,
as far as they organize the events that the clique goes, like it does, so or events or whatever, or even if it's direct action, and so like they have certain loyalty. Oh, this person is he's doing the labor, so obviously we're going to acquiesce if they to their opinion most of the time, or they're a leader, basically an underliner. Now properly in direct action or anarchism, whatever, everyone should be some type of underliner or underlining something. But even when you don't have that going on, because some people do just are followers, not by natural nature, but just they have other things going on. Maybe they lead a project in another way and somewhere else, but they're going to be a follower in this group. In the Pirate Party, they have like temporary leaders they call captains, just like the pirates. Pirate captains were elected, and if they didn't perform and their job was to fulfill the wishes of the crew, and if they didn't do that well enough and they made poor decisions or decisions that didn't lead to a good haul or a good payday, they were unelected. That doesn't mean killed, just unelected. Or the crew of the ship would break up and they would find work elsewhere or join some other ship that maybe was making more money. So you get attracted to a group that's, in this case, doing better politics or getting some kind of win or having some victories. And this is where, there's a competition between all of these little tiny groups that can't seem to grow in any capacity, maybe because the project is not to actually grow, or only grow up to the point that one person can maintain control over it, which is, at most 50 people nationally. But yeah, which is how big CPI got, and that's maybe why this happened. It got big enough that Caleb couldn't really maintain control over it, and there was enough people wronged by him or turned off by him to actually form their own committee, a committee that he wasn't in. Imagine that.
Yeah.
And in some organizations that doesn't exist. There's always like one person who's on every committee and has a hand in everything because they're able to. Usually a retired person, school board chairman, things like that. So I think that's what I want to say on that point. And always, like, I have a skepticism of, is the org I'm in like a cult? Is it just that there's some people who have this personality that they want it to be their cult, but there is a culture in place that prevents that? or all the other people, because they're not baby leftists, or they actually, some of them actually have experience and they know what they're doing, so they can't be tricked. Or you have multiple people who, what do you call it, are leaders. So one who may be cray or not just corrupt, but exploitative, gets overridden by another or outvoted. And you kind of have that tension, and that's where it's like, when you have two figures like that, it's like, are we going to split over this? One person who's a creep and is going to take his clique and break off, and then will be the people who actually want to do good work will be weaker. I'm wondering, like, what happens of the membership of CPI? But it doesn't matter. There are, dozens of these leftist groups.
True.
Some of them are made up of experienced organizers or activists, but they are like a cult, and maybe it's not by a single leader, but like maybe a ghost, a dead leader, or the ideology, or the whatever line they have. Like, PSL, SWP, ISO was kind of like this. They had an ideology and a strategy, and it got to a point where the strategy was complete failure. And so the leadership of ISO, the league committees, voted to dissolve it, just like CPI. It got to a point where now that our leader is like, we're going to kick him out, and he's basically in control of everything. Everything's in his name. He started it. It's in his name legally or whatever. We can't have it anymore. We have to start something new. And that's kind of usually what happens.
Start fresh, yeah.
And that's how you get all these parties with different names that are a little similar. The my Python joke. They were created,
I was just going to say,
because
stays people front.
The last one, you split off either because the person who's leading it is a cult leader, or so there's something shady, or just the political project is going nowhere because it's not good praxis in some way. Or it's like, say, Gezi, we talked about 2 weeks ago, or this, where, and Maupin himself is a splinter. He wanted, someone wanted to be in charge. They didn't get to be in charge, so they split off.
Right.
So if Jesse Ventura or his people within the Green Party, if they split off from the Greens and start their own thing, or actually a better example, the Movement for a People's Party, which is almost entirely made up of Greens or Bernie-crats, but some of them are Greens who, in their own words, were like, I'm tired of being the losing team. Like, the Greens aren't effective. We're not going anywhere. We're not winning enough races. We could win more races if we had a different brand. That's their mindset. It literally comes down to branding. If we just had a different brand, People's Party, not, but there was a People's Party in the 80s, and that got folded into the Greens, which is why you had other Greens that were like, these people are assholes for thinking that branding is the problem here, or that's going to solve the perennial social, political, economic questions. And again, Movement for a People's Party, if you're not aware, has the same issue. Its leader, Nick Braga, is a sex pest. Well, I mean, not in the same way as Maupin, of course, but he has harassed or I don't know if it was sexually assaulted, but he was harassing someone else in the org. They were dating. She broke up with him, and he acted like they hadn't broken up, and it was pretty bad. But the board basically voted, pretty softly, but they did an investigation, and they basically gave him some restorative justice of you're not going to be in a capacity where you manage somebody under you of a different gender. You're not going to this. They put restrictions on it. But the thing with Movement for a People's Party, it's Nick Braga and his father, and they own it in the same way Colin Maupin owns CPI. And so Movement for a People's Party, MMP, is also they have committees in multiple states, but they're all kind of left wondering when they're going to start organizing electoral campaigns.
They're going to do anything,
or when are they going to do ballot drives for getting on the ballot. And that's and that's where the Greens are way ahead of you, because we have been not only cycling through getting. I mean, we get on, we get kicked off, we get on, we get kicked off, but at least we're consistent with doing at least step 1, and then we get to step 2, running local candidates or statewide candidates for prosperity, or for moving the needle, which I wanted to get to. Just some light news of we got 4 ballot lines back. The petitioning was done, and so Massachusetts, California, and the case in North Carolina went in the Greens' favor. So they are back on the ballot there. After being temporarily kicked off by the Dems of that state with their state Senate committee.
Always the freaking Dems.
They were calling. I don't know if you know the story, but look up Green Party media, and the Senate committee there were calling up everyone who signed the Green Party petitions, asking them if they would like to rescind their petition, to take it back. I'm like, are you sure you wanted to help the Greens on the ballot? Maybe they they actually framed it like the Greens lied to you. Like they're actually helping the Republicans by being on the ballot. And they may have told you otherwise. Would you like to take your petition back? And they were, in some cases, and it's not it probably wasn't policy, but you have some overzealous staffers or interns. And they're they were calling people saying they were the Green Party.
Oh, really?
And why? And yeah, so it was one of them was recorded, so at least one example. And so the guy being called is wait, why is the Green Party asking me to take back my petition for the Green Party? Why would they do that?
That makes zero sense.
Well, it's just by any means necessary. Make sure the Greens are never on the ballot. Make sure there's no actual choice.
I just don't understand why they see the Greens as such a threat at this point, because they've never rivaled them when it comes to anything but maybe local level politics.
Zach, don't you listen to any of the villain speeches? If you let even one dissenter, one bit of opposition exist, that is a failure that must be squashed.
Yeah. If one stands up, they might all stand up, and then we're left without food.
Well, no. That's not what he says. He says, there goes our way of life.
Oh, yeah.
Which is a phrase, it's Disney, but I mean, it's a phrase used by neocons and neolibs alike when referring to late-stage capitalism. It's our way of life, which, of course, means it's very good for them.
Oh, yeah.
Not so good for the rest of the world. Okay, so the other thing that's more fun is to talk about something mentioned a few times, which is a cult behavior, deep listening.
Okay.
Deep listening is when you just look into someone's eyes really intently and you blink as little as possible. Because when someone's staring at you, you kind of feel almost guilty. Why are they staring at me?
What are you doing?
Wrong? And of course, you have done something wrong. You are not thinking along the lines of the leader or whatever.
Jeez.
At least that's its feeling and sense that it instills. The other thing is to mention chanting, which I will kind of half complain, half acknowledge that most people don't like chanting. Even when you're in the street and fired up, people don't like chanting. And the people who are really for chanting and do it well are the most radical anarchists, the people who are really committed. They're ready to get hurt if possible. They're not They're not doing this as a hobby. I mean, anyone who, but this is on the other hand, it's cult-like behavior to do chanting, right? But what are you chanting? Is it a good chant? Is it a chant that is fun? Because sometimes the chanting is actually just to keep your mind, to make the marching fun, to walk, or even just walking, something to do. It's like singing a song, but everyone doesn't know all the words to a song, so a 3-word slogan will do. Or if everyone is on the same page, because they've done this enough times, a longer chant. But nothing is more awkward than someone starting a long chant when everybody doesn't know it. But there have been many marches where I try to start a chant with normies. I mean, by normie, I mean, in this context, someone who is first protest, or it's a BLM march with the thousands of people, And again, it's probably the first time they've been in and out in the streets. And I try to start a chant, and nobody's following along.
Oh no.
I keep it simple. I keep it non-controversial. I'm not chanting, I'm an anti-capitalist. I'm an anti-capitalist, or if we don't get peace, burn it down. Just to kind of, there are other ones that are softer, but even then,
Yeah.
you'll have libs that won't repeat or go along. They're uncomfortable because they've probably never done it, so it is super awkward. It's like a muscle you got to practice to be able to be in solidarity with others, to repeat what they're saying, or to have fun with it. It's like oh, I'm here to be serious, but we also need to have fun, and chanting is part of that fun. Chanting, when you see cops on horses, you chant, "Get those animals off those horses! Get those animals off those horses!" You make a joke. Good. You have a joke. It's not just because either that or people have the mainstream media did this. The putting image in people's mind that chanting mobs are dangerous and they're not.
It's the mob mentality.
Healthy society, and people, especially when they're just out for the first time, they don't want to be perceived as being in a mob, or they're definitely not there. Like, I'm not part of a mob. I'm not going to be part of a mob. We're better than that. I'm like, better than what? What is the mob doing is what matters. And obviously just chanting, defund the police or maybe you do Black Lives Matter at a BLM march. But even that, it's like people are kind of hesitant. And but sometimes I have started to chant and people actually follow along, and it feels good because it means I did something. I was assertive and confident, and people thought it was a good idea. Okay.
What? All right. Let's get to the article. And do you want to do the audio version of it, or do you want to just? Boy, it was pretty long.
Oh,
do the summary. What do you think?
I wasn't suggesting we cover it unless you want. Unless there's choice pieces you want to get to, because I don't know how. Have you listened to a full reading of it, or because I listened to Lance of the Serfs read it and then Vosh read it later in the week.
Yeah, I've just heard the highlights of it. Basically.
So I have it sort of memorized. Well, I can.
I could read out the summary here for people.
Yeah, the summary, sure.
Okay. Bringing forward this statement was not easy for any of us, but there was no alternative to speaking the truth. It is our responsibility to stop abuse of power against comrades. Those of us who want to fight for the ideas of constructive, optimistic socialism and anti-imperialism, and who have contributed to the organization Center for Political, but okay, Center of Political Innovation, have been betrayed by Caleb Maupin. Over the years, he has subjected members of CPI to various forms of abuse and exploitation. He pushes sexual desires on members who had considered him to be a leading comrade. He brought his sexual impulse into political organizing. Caleb pushed a member out of CPI and its predecessor, Students and Youth for a New America, after she made it clear that she would not do sexual favors for him. Caleb paid a member for sex who he knew was economically desperate and who we put in that position, mind you. And then went on to push them.
All the members. Mm-hmm. So this is a standard cult thing: is you make your membership poor by restricting what they can do, and mostly by ideology. It's the right thing to do, and also trying to and this is a problem with when you don't actually have a real membership base who pay dues. You're left with activists who are broke, or if they're actually going to do a political project. But the worst thing, which is in this case, is the project is raising the money, fundraising, to pay your own way.
I know.
Your own income.
Yeah.
So you're fundraising, and it's the worst thing. I'll never do it, and I can't imagine why anyone does it for long. But the most cynical or hard-nosed is you fundraise, you ask for donations for people for the cause, but the cause is to pay your rent and your food and other bills and whatever, just cost of living. That's the word, cost of living. Pay your cost of living. Because that's part of, you can't do any political work without paying your cost of living, right? But if you're spending 8 hours a day fundraising or selling buttons or lit, as was the case of CPI or its accessory groups, then the project is just, paying your own expenses. And then it's basically a grift, but it's not even a good grift because you're only making bare minimum, sometimes less than minimum wage in this
Sounded
case.
like less than minimum wage in this case.
Yes, it usually is.
25 to 50 a day.
It usually is, but depending on how you're doing things. So in the case of, what's the group? NYPIRG, which stands for New York Students of something. And it's basically the progressive action group for progressive students. It's left liberal. And
we have MNPIRG here. Yeah.
There you go. Okay. They are a national thing. Yeah. So they hire canvassers at a minimum wage. So they're paid minimum wage first, but they also get commissions based on what they bring in. But they're canvassing suburban neighborhoods where you either get alumni or you just only need left liberal people. And they will usually, because NYPIRG is an established, long, it's been around for decades and decades, people will write NYPIRG checks. And so I have a guy, I know a guy who basically did that. So you get paid minimum wage and he would get $200 checks, like a few every day. And he gets to keep a portion of it, or he gets a portion.
Sure. And
he would do that, if work was slow in other areas, if he needed something to do in the summer. But that's like, that organization can pay the people doing the canvassing for the first part. So if Caleb, he's not a poor guy. You'd think if he wasn't so exploitive, he would at least be paying them the minimum stipend. In this case, covering their rent or whatever, but he wasn't even doing that.
No, he wasn't.
And that's that's where it goes a level beyond, not just economic dominance by paying for their housing and whatever, but he didn't pay them at all. And so it was purely by ideological, like, you're committed to the cause and this is how we're going to fight for communism through with me, because obviously you liked what I said at one time.
Yeah.
Or worse, these baby leftists, these were like, they saw Maupin before they saw any other left tuber.
Yeah.
But particularly the difference is, and this is where the social media comes in, that he's the only, commie group that has a good social media presence for which to recruit these teens and college age people from. The other groups, SLP and other alphabet commie groups, they have campus groups, but rarely. They don't have a lot of import, and they're definitely not savvy or active on social media. So that's kind of how this all went down. And I find it interesting, there's the irony, Caleb Maupin betrayed the members of the CPI, but Caleb Maupin is like, I am the CPI. This is my group. It's his project, which is why it was voted to be ended just a day or so ago.
Yeah.
So anyway, by the way, the sexual kink involved is spanking, and it, in Caleb Maupin's case, very much associated with his authoritarian mindset or his authoritarian parents, which is just Freudian overlay. all you need to.
Yeah.
Yeah. In a way, it's like he never stood a chance, but like obviously, in trying to you take his pathologies, you mix it with a desire to be a good leftist, and then you get this. And that's kind of, so, but unfortunately his only response is to put out the fake bland non-apology. It was a fake non-apology in that, like, I've made mistakes and I will now seek the help to get better, which is he's being forced to do. So we'll see if he appears in a year, but with any luck, he won't.
Yeah, right.
Or if there's justice. But I mean, whatever. I mean, it's been covered by Vosh and Lance that like well, by Vosh because he's more him, that there's definitely civil suits that could, like, beyond civil suits. Like, he's, by some definitions, he raped this woman because
Mm-hmm.
he put her in a position where she couldn't say no.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, he caused her economic hardship and then exploited it directly to advance his kink. So,
Hmm.
yeah,
Which can be done in a healthy manner, but this was not it.
sure. It's not kink shaming at all of him, but it's the way that he got his gratification and the way he
Yeah.
talked about, getting off on ensnaring unsuspecting women into talking about spanking for his own gratification.
There's a little bit of an incelness to it, of like,
Yeah,
I have to game these people into, you know,
right,
I don't know, being friends with benefits.
right.
Which, you should be able to friendly, drop hints like, hey, are you interested in friends with, being friends
Hmm.
with benefits? Or, you know,
Sure.
does this make you, have you ever been turned on by this? But again, the issue here is he wouldn't stop. He would keep doing it, and he would do it with
Uh,
people sometimes almost underage, if not actually underage. Or,
yeah, I wouldn't be
um,
surprised.
and yeah, so it's a pattern.
Well, and there's always an extra level of ickiness when it's that sort of power dynamic where basically he is their boss, he is their source of income, and he's going to them and using that as well. So in a normal
Yeah.
workplace, that would certainly be sexual harassment, if not assault. So
And the issue of like and just to talk more not on the personal basis but the political project basis,
hmm
that the way this worked was he would recruit people into his communist organization, but instead of like helping them be activists or organizers where they were, it would be, you are going to move to New York City and do the
uh,
communism here, or fight for communism here. And you'll do that by canvassing people, selling them lit, which you should never do. Lit should always be something you just give out and leave with people. Even Mormons, come on, and Seventh-day Adventists or whatever, and Christian Scientists understand this. You don't sell your lit. It should
right.
be cheap enough that you can hand it out to people. And if you can't fit it on something you would hand out, then it's too long. Um,
Yeah, people have seconds to glance at it before they're going to decide whether that is immediately waste or they're actually going to hold on to it. So yeah,
well, I
it
have to
makes sense.
wonder if their canvassing was just going around Union Square, or if they were
Hmm.
actually going into the neighborhoods and knocking on doors. But so in one paragraph of this, it's mentioned that like they were button selling in Union Square, and on the other hand, they were canvassing. They called it canvassing.
hmm
So canvassing denotes that they were going for apartment buildings, which again is something that takes all day if you're doing it
Yeah.
properly, or if you're going to get hit enough doors that you'll make the $50 to $100 they made in a day. Which again, they could have gone to any grocery store and earned that on a part-time salary, which is what they begged Caleb to do. And Caleb would said, "No, if you're going to be good communists, you will not take part-time work.
Oh, that
You
was
do
such a
wage labor.
terrible part of it too.
Do
He's
wage
like,
labor."
oh, every revolution, all revolutionaries have to make sacrifices, on and on and on about how they're fighting the good fight, being good revolutionaries. But he wasn't doing any of that stuff. He's sitting there, flying around the country, flying around the world, doing speaking engagements, making tons of money from
Well,
his
I
book
have to.
sales.
I'm the visionary, who speaks well and who writes the things, and I'm
Yep.
the thinker here. It's uh
He's like those prosperity gospel preachers. I have to have a private jet, otherwise I wouldn't be able to reach as many souls.
in a
I have to
way.
have a mansion to set the example.
But
Yeah,
in a way, they were raising money, and maybe that's in the pot of money that the CPI was using, and it wasn't all just Caleb's money.
I should hope
Um,
so,
but
but
we're not getting full transparency here on how things really worked. We're just looking at this article, the statements go through all the social dynamics in play, which are amazingly toxic. They're not relegated to tankies or whatever. They're found in any corporation, any group more than 10 people, really. What we can discuss is how to avoid these things and what orgs does this not occur. And in the Greens, at least, I haven't left. I would have left years ago if this occurred in any sense, because there have been moments where it seemed like it might be occurring, but then my fears are kind of allayed by the fact that either the person who is being toxic or could have been the cult member or the derailer just leaves. They're the ones that leave and split off or say, I'm going to do my own thing now, and you're going to be sorry you shunned me.
Yep.
Which, again, if there is a good left, which there is, that's why these people are on the fringes. They're successful in getting a social media following because that's what, when you being an asshole is what makes you successful on social media, really. The Chapo was discussing this about Trump, that there can only be one Trump, where you have to be crazy enough that you upset everyone, but he can get away with it for enough time because of who he is or how much wealth he already has. If you're anyone else, it eventually backfires on you.
Somehow he's just managed to start enough small fires every single day that it can always consume the oxygen from the last fire, and people will just move on to the next issue.
Right. When with others, the fire stays, and the fire actually just becomes a bigger fire.
Right.
But that's probably a poor analogy. I don't know what proper one would be. I'd have to listen to the clip again of describing what makes Trump successful in this kind of dynamic and others not. Why they burn out after a year or so, or people get sick of them, and they may have a following, like say even Andrew Tate, and now Sneeko, who's filling his shoes. This guy Sneeko, which I never fucking heard of before. Apparently, he's a good YouTuber. But again, all those guys like Sneeko in particular cares about is just being a popular, well-liked YouTuber who's rich and being the center of attention, because that's all he's really ever known in his whole life, because he started YouTubing at 12, 13, 14.
I know.
And as a gamer. And it's never ended, so he really doesn't know how to do anything else. So going full red pill, even though, he's already had the reactionary base there, normal American is really all you need, male, even though he's Filipino. And the Sneeko guy, he's gone full red pill and he doesn't care, blah, blah, blah. But it gets some good clicks and whatever. It's just he's just another in the ocean of them.
Now just playing that game.
It's weird. But it's weird because, I think the tragedy as far as, some of the YouTube watchers or analysts, one guy, is that, he has the talent actually to do other things. And he was successful. He was just as successful, but now he's not. But he's not doing it. And the trigger seems to be that his girlfriend dumped him. And that's all it took from the go full manosphere, because he just, like all the rest, super entitled and whatever.
Yeah.
So, is there more you want to do with this one? We're almost at 40 yet.
No, I think we've covered that pretty well. So just take that off for the time. You want to move on to Marjorie Taylor Greene next?
Actually, let's switch over to Black and Red Salamander. Black Salamander, yeah.
All right.
I think that would be a good segue there. So to introduce it to the viewers, if we have any. Yes, we have James. Hi, James. So this is a political cartoonist who's on our side, or at least he's you can see the colors there. And he does pretty good work. It's very sharp, and it definitely, its quality, it could be a newspaper, so it should be. But it's obviously too radical in its politics to be included there. So we're just going to react to them. I wanted a second opinion on them from Zach, because I have a mixed opinion on them. It's sometimes very normal with his takes or what he's doing, very pro-Ukrainian or whatever. But the point of a political cartoonist is just to provoke.
Yeah, to provoke.
So in an aggressive manner. So it doesn't really matter. Like, does he have a line? Does he actually have something important to say? Not really. But he provokes with his cartoons. And he has this particular character. You see, actually, you're hovering over one of them, and that's his strawman leftist. Not strawman leftist. I call it a strawman leftist because it's a strawman character to me. But it's not a baby leftist, but like the leftist who's naive and dumb and
like
is bad.
The true believer before they've become jaded and
or something. Yeah, exactly. It's like that's kind of what I'm trying to figure out what I don't like about these comics of his. And not that I hate them, but there's something about them I don't like. And maybe it's that they're coming at things in a jaded perspective. There's really rarely, I think his most positive ones were when he was doing when Rojava was in the news, and they were like, so like his ideal leftist is the Rojava fighters. So if that's your standard for like good leftism, everything else is shit. That leaves for very little positivity. And there's not, of course, that's not really the trait of the political cartoonist. It's sort of like being you're a critic of all things,
sure,
of all times. So it's like, well, what do you want? What kind of like leftism do you want? Right. And yeah, it's hard to decipher, and that's maybe that annoys me. Can you make that bigger? I can't even read it, but maybe if I make it bigger. No, I can. I hate the government for killing too many leftists. I hate the government for not killing enough leftists. So we have a common enemy.
I think that's funny. That's poking fun at kind of the Red-Brown Alliance sort of accelerationist mentality.
Yeah. By the way, this guy, he's all of that. He's accelerationism. He's like whatever kind of leftism he wants to critique. This guy kind of is a stand-in, which is why he has the multiple buttons and whatever signifiers.
He's virtue signaling all over the place.
Exactly. He's a leftist who signals his virtue. So he's really just a liberal, I think, at the end of the day. And maybe that's it. And I just have to I'm just seeing him as the left lib who thinks he's a leftist, but he does everything that a liberal would say.
I think that's a good way of looking at it.
Except that there are comics where like he's more radical leftist kind of stand-in, but maybe he represents the bourgeois liberal tendencies that occur in leftist and activist groups where it's hobbyism and what have you.
All right, let's see what else we got here. What is this? I'm not going to join the community. Sorry. All right, Ukrainian grain. Putin with his Z armband.
Doing
very
voodoo.
Nazi-like. Oh, okay. So he's putting pain into multiple parts of the world by
stopping Ukrainian grain shipments or disrupting it enough by taking the ports and what have you.
I mean, okay, but like those are not exactly economically or politically powerful parts of the world. So, is that really a strategy just to make the third world angry? And
it's hard to know like what he would want. Like obviously, he wouldn't want the war to happen at all. You know, Putin's a fascist, so and so on. Yeah, and so anything, no matter how he does things or conducts the war, it's evil. And so, even though I think the message here is in this fight against NATO versus Russia, it's the southern world that is suffering or is being hurt.
Yeah, that's true.
Europe isn't suffering though. I mean, there's obviously drawbacks everywhere.
There's pain at the gas pump, but I mean that's true of any war. It's always the least well off that suffer the most. So I don't know. Is that really saying anything different?
No, it isn't. And that's he has a lot of these like this. But obviously, go through. Sure. There's a lot of his virus ones are interesting. He draws like the coronavirus like as a big.
We've gotten off that.
Yeah, that's not. Yeah, no. Oh, yeah. A trip for DeviantArt. Don't use the arrows. Always click back to the page.
Good to know.
It for some reason don't know how the coding works. It just doesn't go to the next panel in the gallery. It goes to something completely.
Goes to something else.
Yeah. So this one was really like kind of got my goat, but it was both like this is true, but like why do I still not like it? So stop. Before you join that leftist organization, use this quick field test to make sure they're worth your time. Ask them to explain their goals in 30 seconds or less,
Okay.
using at least one number without any words that end in eyes.
Okay.
Is that what do you make of that?
um. So I guess he's saying like they shouldn't be talking about radicalizing people,
Democratizing,
democratize.
socializing.
I don't know. It's
I'm not sure what kind of platform doesn't use the word eyes. So I'm not kind of
yeah.
sure what he's getting at here.
I don't
I'm
either.
not
Yeah.
sure what would qualify using all of these three things. Now, saying you should have an elevator pitch, if the group doesn't have a good elevator pitch, um, then yeah, Caleb
Sure.
Maupin
Sure.
doesn't have, it takes them too long, 10 minutes to
Oh
explain,
God.
and it doesn't help when say tankies like him or rather his followers who are innocent and probably good leftists really I would like to them they're probably just fine on most counts even though Vosh was writing them off as being like fascists when they like in the statement they put socialism or optimistic socialism first and anti-imperialism second.
Hmm.
This is positive to me instead
Yeah.
of what Caleb would do in his books and stuff where he puts
Always.
anti-imperialism first and socialism second. Because when you put anti-imperialism first, that is meaning being pro China, Russia, and other
Pro any power that's not a quote
counterpower to
unquote
the US.
Western power.
Yes,
Yeah.
counterpower to the Western powers,
Yeah.
which is very poor framing for doing politics.
I agree.
Because
You end up
and he would
supporting a
put
lot of really
socialism,
shitty
and he
people.
and he would put socialism second. Because how does breaking U.S. hegemony itself bring about or help bring about socialism? Can you make an argument for
And
that? Does he make an argument for that?
well, there's such a weird cognitive dissonance in all of that because at the same time, at each one of these rallies he would hold, there were American flags flying everywhere. Do you support the U.S. or are you against the U.S.? Like, I would have no idea going into like just wandering into that meeting, calling themselves, Pat
Mhm.
Socks or whatever.
Well, no one
I would
wandered
think,
in. They were all groomed to be there. That was
well,
the
that's
problem.
true. That's true.
That was the problem.
Everyone chose to.
Um,
No, nobody.
but yes, you're right.
Just decided.
It was incredibly contradictory to be these patriotic socialists who are using jingoistic stuff,
Yeah.
rhetoric, and being pro America, so to speak. Pro America as far as like I'm pro the people, which
But
we
then why are you
say.
flying an imperialist flag? Like, why are you flying the flag of the state?
Right. But like, yeah, they don't want to let go of that because that internationalism does turn people up. People are comfortable because they're used to that kind of nationalism. But
Yeah.
at the same time, there will also be anti-America in global and international politics. So,
Uh huh.
or whatever, war and peace. So that will probably raise eyebrows and get them to lose any converts, unless people are new and they're still figuring out what they feel about all of these things. And that's how he got them, or that's why they didn't leave, because all it takes is for them, followers of this, to have a good interaction with someone who is an anti-imperialist but puts socialism first, um, or which like us who don't paint these other nation states as being pure villains because of who
Yeah.
they are or what they are, but
Mm-hmm.
merely being other players in the global system of
Mm-hmm.
capitalism and states, whatever.
Right. Right. Right.
Yeah. So going onward to the cartoon. So the using one number hits it's like this rings true for me because it's basically saying like there should be some kind of it's referring to some kind of my interpretation, some kind of result. If the pitch doesn't include saying we distributed, we saved 100 people from being evicted.
Okay.
And our project is making sure people don't get evicted and fighting for housing for all. And that's our way of doing that. That's a project that you should join. Or we're organizing tenants, and we have 2 apartment buildings that we are organizing tenants in. That's a number. some groups, like say, well, let's just use CPI. What number could they say in results? Like what kind of like maybe the number of trips they went on, the number of youth conferences that they did overseas or whatever. But what
Sure.
were these things? It almost seems like it was a sham all the whole time, where it was just they were going there to kind of do a rally or to speak as Americans or to show up as Americans. So, but yeah, but the last one is like, oh,
What's the point
like,
there?
yeah, what that I need help with. I maybe need a message. Maybe we could put a message, do a comment under there of like, what do you mean by other words that end in eyes? You know, what wouldn't?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it means like but if you're not going to use the shorthand word like socialize, then you have to like put it in terms of like, we want workplace. Well, I guess you say we're fighting for workplace democracy. So maybe that's what he's getting at, to use words like workplace democracy, single payer healthcare, and not we want to nationalize the healthcare system. We want to socialize the workplace, because these are words that have multiple meanings and maybe subjectively speaking, no meaning at all. And yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that could be it.
But at the same time, democracy at work will say we're democratizing the workplace. They will, you know, it doesn't contradict what they're doing. So maybe I'm wrong.
Okay.
What do you think of this one?
Yeah. Yeah.
They're biting, aren't they? This is his other half of his content. It's just really biting. Like, I'm not sure if this is the right way of critiquing what's happening. That's my first thought. Like, don't worry, they're coming this time. I told them a black teenager in a hoodie was playing loud music. So
yeah, to me that falls a little flat, because the reason that they like to go in and beat up on the black teenager with hoodie is because they know they have power in that situation. They're not coming into a school shooting situation because they don't have the upper hand clearly and overwhelmingly. They're fundamentally cowards, so they will pick on the weak. So
this is where Red and Black Salamander kind of comes off like a left lib to me.
Yeah, I can see that.
So there's like the third of his cartoons where he almost kind of has these flat left lib takes, because maybe he's maybe trying to pitch these to that audience, Bernie Crad audience, and then maybe pull them left or towards anarchistic points of view. But I don't lately, maybe the last year or so, I don't see enough anarchist politics in his cartoons, despite has the red and black star. And maybe since the Syrian civil war and Rojava was out of the news, you don't see anarchism in his cartoons. But let's keep going and maybe it'll show up.
Sure.
Otherwise, a critique of actual all nationalism, all states, all nation states, that comes up. So there's that. Go down to the feature gallery. There's a lot more. And you can go to like see all.
Let's see what we got here. It's too late to destroy this. A pipeline. We can still destroy this. Oh, the wall?
The way of life, I think, is what it's being.
Okay.
But yeah, exactly. It's sometimes it's unclear what his.
Yeah.
He's not. What is it? Garrison. He's not doing the thing where he's labeled.
That's right. We need more labels.
We need more labels. He's not putting enough labels. That's his problem.
Where is Mitch McConnell as a turtle in a swamp with a label on him?
He doesn't label the leftist guy. He just kind of puts the signifiers there, like, you know who this guy is.
Yeah.
You know him.
True. All right. Let's see what else we got. DHS looking at Muslims. I must be underfunded because they can't handle the Trump guy.
Yep.
Okay.
But they're using all of these resources to
That's true.
Build a mass surveillance state, which basically was funded and built under the presupposition of the war on terror. So in some ways, all the funding or the resources are still going to preventing Islamic terrorism, not domestic terrorism.
Yeah. This one is a little more pointed. I can agree with this a little more because this exactly was Biden's response after the Capitol
Yeah,
coup attempt.
they need
It's
our
just more
authorities
funding
need more
for.
funding. Yes,
Yeah.
we need to
So
fund the
yeah,
cops, not defund them.
right.
That
That's a
was
good one.
that was what the Dems did.
Absolutely. Oh, what do we got here? Ooh boy, getting more graphic.
But then he'll
curious.
do this, where an anarchist guy will also be like the naive asshole.
But this
I'm the purest radical in the world. I win.
again, yeah, this is not. This is certainly not aligning with history. It's not as though the anarchists were the last to be shot by the Nazis. They would have been rounded up with the
They would be the
socialists and the
first.
intellectuals. Yeah, before they even started their program against the Jews and other minorities. They rounded up the leftists. So
okay, this reminds me that if he does have a general line, it's that of a anti-purity politics, and which itself is like an establishment line to me, to say like, oh, don't be purity, don't, we demand student loan forgiveness. Oh, that's purity politics. You're gonna let the fascists win by demanding that Biden forgive student loans, and you won't vote Dem again if he doesn't. Like, how dare you? This is wrong. And then he's kind of taking that line with this shit like this. And he does have other comics which say a little more explicitly, actually. He almost says it explicitly. And this is kind of a version of that. Because you'll see the leftist dude, the other leftist dude is the one before him. And
then we got
so it's like, we need, but who are we uniting with to stop the fascists? And he is like a good cartoonist, isn't explicit in that.
Yeah.
Because again, he hasn't labeled each of these bodies. How are we supposed to know
I
who's
need
left
to know.
See, we have
and just
black star on patch on their shirt.
Yeah, and I see the communist.
Yeah. There's just all other leftists. There's just all other leftists, basically.
I see a black guy. Yeah, but like, it may just be my experience online too. But I tend to find anarchists, although I have certainly found purists among them, but I found them to be less purist, more willing to reach out and collaborate.
It's better to use the language of dogmatism, where people are dogmatic with their political ideology or affiliation or their identity.
I think that's a good way of putting it.
Purity is it's a conservative frame to talk of purity.
Sure. Yeah, I think dogmatic. That's definitely a better way to put it. Here's your favorite man again here.
Yeah.
Don't you think it's about time to get rid of that old thing? Stalin did the best that he could. Stand with the DPKR against Western imperialism. And then, yeah.
ML, like Marxist-Leninism, is this old raggedy doll that we leftists gotta let go if we're going to make progress of it, I guess.
I see a little bit of truth in that, just latching on to historical figures for whatever reason, and just totally venerating them against all evidence, against all. What are you doing to actually advance your politics in that? What if Stalin was right in everything that he did? Does that mean that you've, pushed socialism further because you finally won that argument? I don't think so.
I don't know if it's a coloring mistake, but what's with the person's that red blotch on their
I know,
hair?
that's what I was like, are they bleeding out of their head having to tell him this? What is going on here? That is weird.
It could just be a miscoloring, but it's weird.
Yeah.
It's usually
because it looks like other light brown stuff. That would make more sense. It's kind of a light brown.
So yeah, but again, I also feel a little insulted. What? I think the Soviet Union wasn't a total mistake, and this makes me like a baby who can't let go of his toys.
Sure, it definitely cuts both ways. Like, you shouldn't be so willing to just put everything in the dustbin and never consider anything.
Stand with the DPRK against Western imperialism. You mean, drop the sanctions so people aren't starving there, and treat them like a legitimate government because they are one.
Right.
They're
Yeah.
no
I
more, they're
don't.
no less legitimate than any other fucking authoritarian or top down. I mean, it's a hard
Sure.
state, you know.
And I definitely wouldn't want Korean War Part Two. So like, yeah.
We owe them aid for bombing their fucking other country.
Yeah.
We owe
For
them a
sure.
lot of money. We should have paid to rebuild their country, like in France.
Uh huh.
Anyway, keep going. There's more. There's virus stuff. Like oh yeah, he has this theme of treating people who are, which I find is fine, but it's also a little overboard. Treating the anti-maskers or anti-vaccine people as like jihadists
Oh.
or like they're terrorists. Probably won't get there, but I did
Okay.
the send it to all the people who.
What? Yeah. Why didn't you come and see it when it was well, it was still small.
It's like a
Instead of
growth. It's a growth on
growth
this
of
fact.
Nazism.
All the people who died in bigger outbreaks. I didn't want to be insensitive to all the people who died in bigger outbreaks. Yeah,
I mean,
that's
that's
kind of hard to
strange.
read.
Yeah, and there's kind of an element of fascism in pretty much the entire history of
There's
the United States.
there's
So,
multiple levels to it. I think where like there's the level of when people don't go in for healthcare early enough. It's like, well, I didn't want to bother you. I didn't want to. Um, in this case, it's like there are all the others who are killed by fascism.
mhm.
Countries, I guess, countries are killed by fascism, and and he didn't want to insult, like, be insensitive to them by getting like I don't know. It's almost like a straw man social justice warrior, where like in trying to
Huh.
be sensitive to people's problems, you don't solve problems or your own problems.
Mhm. Yep. Yeah, I think maybe there's something in there about the reluctance to call something fascism because it's insensitive to people that died during the Holocaust or something like that. I hear that thrown around
But then I'm
from time to
wondering, like
time, but
in some of these cartoons, it's like who is making this argument?
yeah.
What leftist, like who is the audience? Like this, I'm wondering who this guy's audience, because to me, originally, his audience is other leftists. So we should always kind of be
Yeah.
critiquing other leftists and not like general U.S. stuff. But I mean, he kind of draws, but maybe whatever he fancies,
Sure.
or you know, um,
Well, I remember. I think Ben Burgess was really reluctant for a long time. Maybe even still is to call the alt right and co and Trump himself especially fascist. So maybe that's who
um,
it's aimed at.
well, oh yeah, maybe.
But hard to say. Hard to say. That's a
In,
little bit
in,
of a
in his let's see, in his what's it, descriptions, he'll always kind of say like, this person, or like who I'm talking about
ah.
here.
Okay, so there's the context. What's the point of never forget if we don't use the knowledge we're supposed to remember? Okay, so yeah, I guess call fascists out when you see him. Okay,
Yeah, sometimes it's very simple
that's okay.
or too simple.
What do we got here?
Video games and mass shootings. Yeah, I'm not sure if that's meant to be Trump or just any kind of neat,
Yeah,
and it's not quite clear.
yeah. So, oh, I see. So like his tweet is connected to the TV. So
Yeah,
is it saying that Trump's tweets are causing mass shootings? Okay.
I guess.
I
Yeah,
mean, he's probably not wrong. I mean, plenty
it's,
of people get radicalized by this sort of thing. So.
but it's not really that or just that. It's the board teams that are toxic enough already. I mean, they're toxic enough. Ready Player One. It's called Ready Player One. He's Player One.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Trump is Player
Okay.
One. It's a game to
Gotcha.
him. Well, it's all a game to him. I guess there's that.
Oh, all right. Yeah, I got it. You really want me to join DeviantArt?
Well, I'll have an account at least for everybody
Or have an
healthcare,
account? Yeah.
aka just get another job.
Hmm. So
It's
tying your
ball and
healthcare
chain.
to your
It doesn't
job
look.
is ball and
Almost looks
chain.
like it's a tube connected to him, but it's a ball and chain
Yeah,
with an IV. So it's both.
yeah. So it's yeah,
His
yeah. That's
servitude
true.
is what gives him life.
That's true. That likely is a pretty big reason why we never get universal health care because employers like having that control.
Well, until we're
So,
fighting employers like we should be.
well, that I mean, yeah, but I'm just saying the way that our politics work and how
I know
they
we need labor power
absolutely.
and figure that out.
Yeah, this isn't the most subtle cartoon, but American health insurance is the kind of evil that often deserves a slightly less diplomatic approach. I also wanted more practice drawing chains because they're hard. Okay.
Right. This is
Oh,
this is one of his non-subtle ones. The rest are.
here's a cartoon for Tim Pool.
Yeah.
Always saying the Civil War is right
Right.
around the corner. He's drawing Trump a lot as it's kind of toad or frog like. I wonder if that is just
It's a
his
choice.
style or it's a choice.
Well,
Yeah.
it's different than any other.
Yeah.
Uh,
So his presidency is linked to starting a civil war.
Let's
Yeah.
do a few more,
Okay.
and then we'll go to Tim Pool.
President's approval rating. Military lifts it back up. Yeah,
Pretty
not
much.
untrue.
He's definitely good at drawing blood. He loves
Yeah,
drawing
he's
blood,
definitely good at drawing blood.
which you don't like. Oh yeah, this one's weird to me.
What now? What communist is supporting the police? Hmm.
Tank top. So it's called tank top. Scroll down to what his description is.
One for the Western so-called socialists who keep defending China's authoritarianism. So this is aimed at people that like China. Just imagine that the Baka has a pair of crossed QBZ 95s and says, "I respect the police, stand for the flag, and uphold Xi Jinping." Thought. Does that offend you, Snowflake? There definitely are some that will just bend over backwards to defend anything that the Chinese government does.
But aren't they just
They're definitely not as
online
bad as
personalities who are just like
yeah,
people
pretty much.
who are just doing it for the views?
Well, yeah, for
I
who knows
mean,
what.
I don't think I've encountered anyone. Well, I have to think hard. No, I don't think I've met anyone who actually does that in real life. There are some old timers who have gone to Cuba a few times, and they'll maybe talk that way about Castro. But no, even they're conditional about like Cuba has problems, but they're also doing a lot of great things. And that's kind of what we can say about China. It's not great government wise, but they
Yeah,
do build a lot of rail, and they are a leader in green energy now,
sure.
and they were able to
And
do
they have
that because of their
and they have
economy.
and they have
Because
better health care.
private property doesn't really exist. Everything's leased. You lease your
Yeah,
property from the government.
yeah,
So after the lease is up, they can take it back or requisition it,
yep.
which is how the eminent domain flows so easily there.
Hmm.
Which is a bad
Interesting.
thing when it's the individual homeowner,
Mm-hmm.
or especially someone who had a house, and this house was my family for generations before the revolution and the world wars.
Sure.
So there's that kind of shit.
Yeah, I can see
But
that.
is that the same as Blue Lives Matter? I don't know.
No,
It's
absolutely
not.
not.
Even the
No.
PLA is not white supremacist. I mean, Han supremacist in some respects. Some
Mm-hmm.
like because it's not.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a like our own forces. I guess it's not that all of them are white supremacists or dominionists, but there's enough there that they have influence.
Mm-hmm. What do we got here?
Listen up, Snowflake. Your protest hurts my feelings. So this is aimed at Blue Lives Matter.
Yeah, that's funny. I've seen other versions of that
Yeah.
done with more readable text, but
Mm-hmm.
because it definitely could be your hurts protest my feelings. Okay. Let's pick one more and then we'll maybe
Another
move
with the
on to
leftists.
next.
Yeah, do that.
Oh, another with the leftist. Here we go.
Oh
All
yeah,
right.
this is the weird. This is the
Trump just announced another book burning at the giant radioactive crater where the Lincoln Memorial used to be. Ready to fight? Yes, what a fool. Uh, what a fool I was to ever put my faith in liberal electoral politics. Let's rise in revolution together, burn down the White House, and make passionate love by the light of the flames. So this is his fantasy of the way the conversation's going. And now he's saying Trump just, and she says, "Yeah, I know. Thanks for not voting, comrade. Don't ever talk to me again."
So those that did not want to vote for Biden are all accelerationists, I guess, who wanted. Yeah. But in this case, it's his fantasy is that things are bad enough that she will be radicalized,
Right.
and in reality, she's neither radicalized or things are actually as bad as as his fantasy, fascist nightmare. But he's obviously he's relaying bad news with a smile on his face because he's like, well, aren't you radicalized now by how bad things have gotten? Which sort of happened with some people, but obviously then as soon as Biden wins, then this girl she basically is checked out.
Yeah.
She doesn't care anymore. But that's in my head.
No, yeah.
That's the fantasy in my head that all these people are just they've just had.
Yeah, and that's a good point. You hit it there, James. What if you didn't vote for either one of them? Yeah, right? What if you actually tried to vote for something better?
Well, in this case, the straw man is that anyone who argued against voting for Biden, or I mean, in this case, he was. I mean, it's not straw man. There were lots of people that were like, "I'm not voting in the general. It doesn't matter, either because I'm a New Yorker and my vote doesn't matter, or I just don't support electoralism up to this point after Bernie."
Yeah. Well, geez, at the federal level, I can totally see just feeling so disillusioned that you don't vote for anybody. Like, it is so bought and paid for by lobbyists and moneyed interests that, that's a totally normal, understandable reaction.
The only thing worse here is not being talked about. He does not have any Green Party bashing comics or, there's no. I don't think I've seen a straw man Green Party member.
That's good.
Because that's not on his radar, but just like a lot of other, just like everyone else, we're not even on other people's radar. Yeah, just as James kind of says, there's a blanket and the two-party system, but outside of I will help with some kind of electoral reform, elections reform, or I'm for them. Okay, what do you want to do to end the two-party system? What does that mean? How you do that? It's not. I don't hear a lot of good answers to that outside. Well, I'm in a third party, and I want to break the monopoly by party organizing. That's the only answer that sat well with me, and that's why go along with it.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's go to Pim Tool. Pim Tool.
This got to be some real.
Last time we talked about him, he didn't really have good videos that week, and I want to do kind of like a video of the week. So now he had two. He had one about the Biden debt relief, college debt relief, or this one, and you picked this one. So Taylor Greene swatted by trans activists. This is attempted murder. Civil War. What was the FE? Civil War fear worsening.
How could it be any worse than he's had it for the past how many years?
He's petrified.
It's his one beat that he.
It is terrible to be afraid all the time for multiple years in a row.
Yeah, I mean constantly just bracing for impact is no way to live. Yeah. All right, let's hear what we got here.
This morning at around 1 a.m., Marjorie Taylor Greene was swatted, reportedly by a transgender activist.
Who reported that?
An individual told the police that they committed the swatting because they were upset with her position on transgender surgeries and medication for children.
Can anyone else be upset with that position? Does it have to be a trans individual?
Recently,
we
Marjorie
can
Taylor
go with the
Greene.
assumption that everything he says is some kind of lie
Yeah, absolutely.
or half truth at best.
Yeah, misdirection.
Introduced a bill to make it a felony to provide such a thing to a child. Now, I know most of you know what swatting is, but for those who are not familiar, it is when you call the police or send them a message somehow indicating there's a very serious threat, and your goal is to get a heavily armed SWAT team to kick in someone's door and terrorize them. However, it has resulted in death in several circumstances, and thus, I would call it low-tier attempted murder. I don't need to qualify it. It's attempted murder. I would say that someone did try to kill Marjorie Taylor Greene. But you know what the issue we have is we always want...
I mean, on that issue, he is right. That is generally the goal of
does that make the police contract killers?
It kind of does. It kind of does.
I mean, there is death by cop where one rushes a police officer expecting that they'll shoot you. This is something black people use, not usually something a white person says, but I don't know. But yeah, let's just keep going. I don't have to comment on this.
Want to pull things back a little bit. We don't want to exaggerate. We don't want to go too far, but here's the reality. People have died from this.
What's that?
I said he doesn't want to go too far already.
Yeah. Far be it from Tim Pool to go too far.
The action has a decent probability. I say decent because I don't want to say it's high. People get swatted often. It's horrifying. And the amount of times that swatting results in death is low relative to the amount of times people get swatted. But the chance that someone could die is actually, it's high enough. Granted, being low, still high enough. For that matter, it's still terrorism. And all this is going on as the fear of civil war has continued to escalate in this country. So there it is, Tim Pool.
Whose fear? Whose fear of civil war? Who's saying this? Are these polls? Are you citing a Pew Research? What's going on, Tim?
Pool said civil war. Take your drinks. But maybe I'm wrong about civil war.
Here we go. Here's the immediate clawback. Where he'll just be,
maybe I'm wrong.
Maybe I'm wrong, though. This way I can just say I was right no matter which way it goes. Play both sides, so I always come out on top.
So
my vision.
Before we continue, I want to get our position straight on this first. I'm on two minds on whether or not I want to call swatting, or really, well, okay. I want to start with terrorism is a failed tactic when it comes to overall leftist strategy. It's been done successfully, of course. There's Greek cells would assassinate high up level members of the fascist government or the government. And you can have successful leftist terrorism, meaning that the targets are right. You actually have maybe even public support. So it doesn't turn the people against you right away. It depends on who your targets are. If you are targeting the right people in the right ways, in ways that don't have collateral damage, whatever. But all that aside, it's never really been a successful strategy. Even the most successful leftist terrorists have not, say, inspired mass movement or inspired a change in government. Terrorism only brings down the state on you and anyone connected to you, your ideology.
For sure.
And this seems to be this historical record. You could have terrorist groups that become a government later, but they become a government later or they take power with a mass movement or union power or labor power that exists, or it's built either in tandem with what they did or with other people. It was never their actions alone, or their actions really didn't contribute that much, unless it was, I guess, civil war already. In this case, it's not terrorism, it's war. But all war is terrorism. But that aside, let's say terrorism is defined as a country or is not an actual state of war. And it's you're doing the kind of violence. So that aside, it's not a good tactic. I mean, it can be done successfully, but it's not a good strategy.
I don't think in this case it's a good strategy at all.
Point one, I'm sure we agree. Point two, Do we agree? I'm not sure if we. Oh, actually, no. I would agree that swatting is a form of terrorism, at least on an individual.
Yeah.
You target an individual. You're using the state to do the violence
Mm-hmm.
by tricking them,
Mm-hmm.
which of course is a situation that's very new, or at least of our generation, because SWAT teams were something that didn't exist before the '80s, but were a product of the war on drugs.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so let's see. Um, so do we consider this a left winger? Let's assume it was a trans activist. Let's say take him at his word. We're not going
Sure.
to, but let's say with a hypothetical. We have a leftist who, well, hey, we not just Taylor Green, but the person who called the SWAT for Tim Pool. You know, do we personally support these actions as, or we wouldn't because it's terrorism and terrorism's not a good tactic?
I would not. I don't think this is. I don't think it has the intended effect either way. Like Tim Pool is bigger than ever. Jeremy of the Quartering has not stopped after being swatted. Marjorie Taylor Greene is just going to dig down and use this as ammunition to whip up her base. Oh,
That's
we
Tim
must
Pool's
be
doing.
getting something right.
Well,
What's that?
Tim Pool is using it to whip up her base. She doesn't have to do
Yeah,
anything.
yeah, absolutely. Oh, I mean, he's the biggest cheerleader for the right. Uh,
But yeah,
so no, just from a
and
very even from just a practical point of view, this is a dumb tactic that tends to work in reverse. Like if in I don't know what their intention was, but it's certainly not going to silence her. If it ended up killing her, which is very unlikely for a sitting member of Congress,
it wasn't going to, though. I mean,
right?
it rarely does.
But
And
even if it did, there's just going to be some other idiot to step into her shoes. She is not saying anything unique or that can't be replicated by others on the right anyway. So someone else will just step in, invoke her memory, and use that to continue to hold on to power anyway. So
if anything, Mr. Toole is getting this entirely backwards because the recent story is on my mind is Keffel's getting swatted. It was a UK
yeah,
transaction.
I was thinking of that too.
She had
yeah.
a gun in her face. She wasn't killed, but it's helped her fundraise for herself quite a lot. But
Oh,
mostly
like
because
crazy. Yeah.
she needed to move because somebody knew where she lived, and that's obviously
Right.
a problem for someone who's a streamer.
But yeah,
Um,
it's pulled her out of relative obscurity. I mean, she was well known on Twitch, but outside of left
Yeah.
political Twitch, yeah, she's gotten national attention. She's gotten international attention now. It has done the exact opposite of whoever was trying to target her was
And
intending
that's
for
what
it to do.
terrorism sort of does, because even when it's done against a royal family back in the era when anarchists were like committing propaganda of the deed, um, and that's what I mean by left wing terrorism. Propaganda by the deed is left wing terrorism. And even when they were successful in killing the czar or some royal, it
Yeah.
wasn't very disruptive to anything. And in time,
Right.
it was the trigger for the World War.
Mm-hmm.
And the World
There you go.
War,
Yeah.
though,
Franz Ferdinand.
certainly was one of the dominoes that maybe allowed or triggered the Russian Revolution. So you actually got, and after the First World War, you did have a lot of socialist revolts.
Mm-hmm.
Only one of them succeeded in the long run, at least as far as the Soviet Union was a long-term success.
Mm-hmm.
But the rest failed, so it wasn't really that positive. And in fact, if anything, the First World War was kind of what ended the building of a pretty almost dominant left-wing
True.
politics.
True. And in the U.S., the left's opposition to World War I was used against them very effectively to hammer them to pieces. So, yeah.
But especially in Europe, where you have all those revolts that were put down, and that really, go on and on. But yes, it's usually it's only the most kookish that talk of propaganda by the deed in positive terms, and those that kind of go out and basically commit death by cop, by like the guy who attacked what was it, ice police cars or something, and he was killed.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like going out in a blaze of glory, which is
I
it's
was thinking too of the
because you
right
really
wing.
need to do something, but
Yeah. Right.
then
I don't think
almost
that's
out of boredom, but
no.
because you're not organizing. Because organizing keeps you busy. That building a real campaign keeps you busy. That's why. And Gandhi. Oh yeah, I'm going real off track here, but I watched over the last week the Gandhi biopic in the '80s with Ben Kingsley.
Mm-hmm.
I watched it all the way through, or at all really, and it got me thinking quite hard because I hadn't before, or at least not for seriously, thought about Gandhi's philosophy and politics, but also just putting him in context as he spent his whole life being a political organizer. And when you think of Gandhi, the guru, or the way he's portrayed in America, maybe it's an American thing. He's portrayed as a guru, a spiritual man, and he certainly was, like he was religious, and but he kind of combined political ideology with and strategy with spiritualism, I guess, and that maybe is the problem. But with the philosophy of nonviolence, but it was more a strategy. It was a strategy of nonviolence, or the active noncompliance, civil disobedience. And it was always a strategy because he knew from his experience and observations that India was filled with terrorists who wanted to just kill the British, get the British out by any means necessary. And he could see how ineffective that was, how it only gave the British in their minds all the justification they need to keep these unruly Indians in line, and how if they ever did leave, it would be mass bloodshed and civil war.
Right.
And he wanted to, show, at least in the press, as it was reported at the time, that look how peaceful these Indians are being in their independence movement. And not shown in the movie, because it's just a movie showing the highlights, all the organizing that was happening. Like, there's literally the scene where him and like 3 volunteers of college educated, and they're in the almost poorest part of India, the most exploited, and it's poor because it's exploited. And it makes it clear that he tells the volunteers who've been sent by Nehru, we've got 3 months of hard work to do because we're going to document everything that's going on in this province. It's going to take us months, and there's going to be a lot of risk because we're going to be harassed by the police the whole time. And they're like, yep, we're on board. And the next scene is the 3 months later, where the British authorities are responding to the findings of the report that they made. And that was the kind of stuff that Gandhi was doing for his career, that it was hard, long, tedious work,
Right.
but it would get results bit by bit until after 30 years and both world wars, it became too expensive to maintain the Indian colony.
Uh-huh. Yeah. So, yeah, that would definitely be a counterpoint to just the easy, radical step of terrorism.
Let's SWAT Taylor Green. But it's like, you SWAT Taylor Green because you don't know what else to do, or you're not in a group that can picket her, and that's where it becomes like the end of protest rhetoric. Even protesting, as the right has formulated this line that's like a type of terrorism. A boycott is economic terrorism. A protest is like a emotional terrorism. It's like they're making me nervous.
Yeah.
Hurting feelings, and that's terrorizing me. It's a different kind of terror.
Right.
I'm afraid for my life because they're chanting Black Lives Matter.
Right.
And
this woman is.
Left with, what are we to do? It seems like every other tactic except the civil. Well, no, even civil disobedience, or active noncompliance.
Right.
Well, that's what I mean. The civil disobedience is something that's done all the time, but it's also either ignored or ineffective, and it doesn't make the point.
Right.
But Gandhi was successful in that it wasn't just his hunger strike, because his hunger strikes were actually aimed at the Indian people, not the British. It was actually get the Indian people to stop or do something, and they listened to him because he was a respected leader. But when it came to getting the British to acquiesce or when they were making demands, it was non-compliant. So we need to ask the question of what does it mean to not comply with marginally terror green, neoliberalism. What does it mean to not comply with it? To Gandhi, at least going off of a movie, to not comply was to make salt, because the British Empire had a monopoly of salt in India. So it was illegal to make your own salt as an Indian. Only the royally or the British trading companies owned property could make the salt. So, but it wasn't just the making of the salt at the beach, but then the salt march, which was, we're going to raid and take over the salt works, but we're going to do it through nonviolent noncompliance. We're just going to walk in, and we're not going to fight, but we're just going to walk in. The police lines will not let us. They will beat us, but we're just going to keep doing that. And that's our point, that it is only through violence that they actually keep us from what is ours, which is salt, or the production of salt. So maybe we need to kind of do that kind of stuff. And because this is said in the movie explicitly, because it's his writings or whatever, that the purpose of the noncompliance is to provoke a response in the authorities. And so whether it's burning a limo or smashing windows or whatever kind of direct action, there is that mindset of we're provoking a response in the authorities. But what kind of response do you actually want? And what is that response when it's videotaped or recorded or shown? What is that going to inspire in others? Not only in feelings, but what kind of action will it inspire? Because it seems like when we inspire or we provoke the state, it only leads to more defeatism, in that you can't do anything against the state. We have to join it. We have to compromise. Okay. Long diatribe.
No.
Only a minute and a half in.
I know. Well, there's just so much to
But I wanted to talk about Gandhi, because the movie gets hard. And
and it's one I haven't seen, so I think
it's worth it. It's a 3-hour one. I watched in 2 parts, 2 halves. But it's a good one, because it starts. The first scene is him being assassinated, but the first scene of young Gandhi is he's on a train in South Africa, and he's trying to strike up a conversation. Oh yeah, he's in the first class car, and he's basically getting thrown off for not being white. And you have the guy who's like, "There's no colored lawyers in South Africa," and he's like, young, sort of entitled, because he's upper class in India. I was like, "Sir, I have stand at the bar in London, and I have been, a graduate of this, this legal college. So I am an attorney, and that by definition, there at least one attorney in colored, as you say, colored attorney in South Africa." And he's like, "I've always ridden first class. I've always ridden first class." And he gets thrown out as he's saying that as he's getting thrown out. And that's sort of the movie decides it's written that's a theme that, like, because the rest of his life, or at least when he gets to India, and when he says we need to be amongst the people, we need to learn from the peasants, so we need to be in the masses, build a mass movement. Wink, wink. He is a communist. He means ride third class, and he never rides first class again, and he's always riding third class.
So that's how you be a man of the people, huh? Okay.
And make your own clothes and so on.
Yeah. He was real big on the spinning wheel as well. All right. Well, let's get back to the video.
Was too narrow. I talked about this on Timcast IRL, that the assumption of civil war implies that there's 2 factions actually standing up to each other. And if you take a look at political turmoil in many countries, it wasn't a civil war. It could very well just be a revolution. You take a look at pre-Soviet Russia and the Bolshevik Revolution. You take a
What's the fucking difference, Tim? For one side, it's a revolutionary war. What do you mean? What is, it's just
The Confederates considered their fight to be a revolution as well. A revolution
exactly.
for them. And they actually, well, I mean, I'm just going off of Gods and Generals, which is a piece of Confederate propaganda. But it was like, let this be the second American Revolution.
Yeah, exactly. When has there ever been a civil war where one wasn't trying to take control of the entire territory?
Or the territory, the government, whatever.
Yeah, the government, whatever.
That's kind of what they're about. And
Yeah.
that's sort of why saying there's civil war coming or it's here is always hollow, because unless there is an armed force attempting to seize power, and no, January 6th does not count as that, because they weren't going to
They were not going to win.
Power.
No.
Yeah, that's why as like C. Greeling or Gray, like one of those political science channels, talks about like you need the keys to power. There's like 4 keys of power, which is like military, bureaucracy, social society, and the fourth thing.
Yeah. They definitely were not going to get all of that. At best, they could have assassinated some political leaders and
probably capital. You need capital. So you need the banks. You need the banks. If you lack in one, you're not going to take total control, because one of the other types can counter you.
Right.
If you just say you have the military under your thumb, it's a military movement. The bureaucracy can just cut the purse strings, and boom, their supply is cut off. There'll be no more orders of whatever ammo that they need. If you don't have the banksters, Boeing and Lockheed Martin stop production, or they cut you off, whatever. It's all a system where they're all mutually supporting each other politically, so to speak.
And I mean, it seemed like there was too many branches of the government beyond just Congress who would have opposed Trump. Like, in a worst case scenario, what they could have done is kill enough political leaders to really sow chaos, in the hopes that Trump could swoop in and say, I will maintain order, and for that reason, I'm dissolving the Constitution, blah, 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 blah. I think there was enough people like the State Department, the Justice Department, and the military itself who, at that point, would have just said no, probably. So
maybe the complexity of our society is sort of a reason that like it inoculates us from civil war and civil strife. That's sort of why they were set up in the way they were set up in the first place. Stability is always a major goal, and it is always the goal, or the speaking of goals, purposes of the bourgeois, or like it's like the bourgeoisie want stability over everything. And that means setting up institutions, and enough of them that they all counter each other. And that's sort of what 3 branches of government are meant to do in the first place. It's why it was a positive step. It means that there isn't just one apparatus, that if you have that, you're in power now.
You got that, now you got everything.
I have the big helmet, the biggest helmet, and I have the helmet, so that means everyone does what I want.
All right. Moving on.
To look at Weimar Germany and the Nazis' rise to power, not civil wars, but a lot of political violence that ultimately just led to totalitarianism and genocide.
Just led to it.
And that could be the path we're on as the terror campaigns escalate. I would say, however,
for 20 years.
What is that connection there? Someone's swatting MTG is the same as the Weimar Republic crumbling.
The night of the long night.
Well, that was this is
Kristallnacht. It's all Kristallnacht.
Wow.
For 20 years. And by the way, since the 90s, you've had right wingers talk of civil war or fears of it. And it's like for 20, it's like we've been Weimar Germany for longer than in that state existed.
Exactly.
Or we've
Many
been in
decades more.
The road to fact. Ours, I guess, is 30 years long, while theirs was 3. But
I mean, now I can believe that we are closer to true and naked fascism than we have been in probably quite some time. But you don't think so?
Well, only in a cynical way of like I've been hearing this my whole life.
Yeah, sure.
And I've been in these rooms or these people who say these things since I was a kid. When Bush was not elected, Bush W, that was the beginning of fascism or something, or the Bush administration was as bad as it could get. It was totally right wing. Everything they were doing, there was a lot of things they were doing besides just the war in Iraq, and all the incompetence. But that's what I mean. That like every cycle, it's like this is the next step towards fascism. It's like, well, how many steps is it going to be? 100? 100 political cycles, and then it will be fascist. Obviously it's frog and pot style stuff here, but at the same time, our system, and this is why, like, I don't say you're speaking bullshit totally. I mean, I want to. When libs or left libs talk of how we still have democracy. It's still not too late. We have democracy, and we need to be able to protect it from Trump and fascists. And that means we need to vote for Democrats because that protects democracy. Because that democracy, that stability seems resilient enough, at least from civil war. But that's kind of the problem, that as long as there's a state, even if it is governed by fascists or far right wingers or any kind of right winger, even liberals count, that's better than civil war. But then you have to, I wanted to answer the question, how do you picture civil war happening? What forces are at play? And it's not going to be labor power versus capital or liberals, or I mean, they imagine it being left and right. But who is left? And there, in this conversation, in Tim Pool's world, a Biden is as left as we are.
Yeah,
we're in the same category. And so he sees it as the two parties are the two sides. But guess what? But I mean, we don't have to guess. But when we say the two parties are two wings of the same bird, or that it is a two-party system, as in there's one system with two parties. These are not two different sides. They are two different factions of capital that disagree on how to do policy in various ways. But they are on the same side as far as the country and who should be running it, which is them, both at the same time. So there's this assumption that there are these other sides, these other forces that are strong enough, large enough, and controlling institutions that are not the Republican and Democratic parties that somehow exist out there. But the idea we maybe need to drill in their heads is that there isn't. Like, until we're at a point where labor power is big and strong enough, then maybe you can say that there's at least a third side. And if fascists, I'm talking about the actual like alt-right, unite the right groups, if they were large enough that they were actually like Ku Klux Klan level in the 1920s, where they had a membership of millions of people and they were a very mainstream org, they would be a force, a political movement and they need to control institutions. But in their own media, as Tim and Ben, even with the millionaires and other capitalists funding them, and being part of the power structure even, but they have the idea and the mindset that they are also still a minority, that they don't control any of the institutions. Because at least if you are far right, you don't. You only have these bubbles just like we do. And they're in the same position as far as like they don't control any institutions. If we had organized labor, we would control certain institutions. Either big labor is an institution, but they would also be able to have their own stuff, which when you have an effective left, you do. But after the 50s, the union movement, labor, stopped controlling any institutions. They let the liberals have it all, or they joined the liberals in being labor aristocrats. And that's when it all went wrong. Or that's when, it backslides. So that's my analysis.
No, yeah. You make some very good points. Still, though, I don't know. this feels different in a way than it has been in the past.
Yeah.
It feels like we're on the okay. So for one thing, virtually every American family is an $800 crisis away from bankruptcy. You have that many people on the edge of catastrophe. All it takes is the wrong thing going the wrong way for long.
Okay.
Like it.
The scale of that is different.
So there's that.
But there was always a third that were like that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in the past, in our lifetimes and beyond.
Yeah, but it
From the
seems like
50s
it's a
over.
lot more now, and it also seems as though there's this whole neoliberal experiment of just fleecing all the social programs, taking
Right.
all the
It's
safety nets
kind of
away,
reaching.
is ramping up to. It just takes a few bad years. Like it seemed like COVID almost pushed us over that edge.
Just when it seemed like, you know, that neoliberal project's in an end game,
Mm-hmm.
it isn't, because capitalism can't stop. There is no end game.
But I mean, it has to. But it also has to end. But it also has to end at some point. Like it requires a constant expansion. That's physically impossible for one thing.
The contradictions, you know, become too great to deny or get around or work around. Yeah.
And then we have corporations buying up every available bit of real estate right now, which to me sounds like they're getting desperate to find new vehicles of raising money out of nothing for themselves. But at the same time, if it gets too heated, that's going to mean that no one's going to be able to afford a house, or the properties that they own, they're going to have to charge such high rents that there will soon be a housing crisis.
That's fine with them. That's fine with them. It's clear that as far as landlords or the system is concerned, millions can go homeless as long as it means millions others can pay the rent. As long as there's enough. But it really doesn't mean that there doesn't have to be enough. It just has to be some, or something like that. I mean, I don't know how the numbers would work in the long term, but they have those studies themselves. They do their housing market studies to know, like, in the next 30 years, there'll be this much growth and this kind of income disparity, or rather, you can see these kind of enough of these incomes from these sectors to build enough market rate housing, and you'll be able to pay all those bank loans back and then some to justify building the new apartment blocks that Albany's getting. Even. And you have even progressives who will, I mean, they're older, and this is why they have to say it, or they have to feel they have to say it, that, like, look, you're entitled to a profit, but you're not entitled to depravity or something, or this, which of course just strikes me as like, that's a dumb. Why are they entitled to a profit? Why is anyone entitled to a goddamn profit?
Right.
It's like, why do you say that? Why. That's like, you know, that's not something I agree with, but that's what makes me the kook. If I showed up to that Zoom call in the planning committee for the council that I listened to at work.
Okay, so anyway, there's that. And then there is this burgeoning labor movement that does seem to be growing by leaps and bounds. Like, whereas a year ago, I don't think there was any.
But it's nowhere near what it needs.
It's nowhere near, but it's growing at a very fast rate, though. It seems to be.
If I see, I need to see the stats that say that we're like back up to 10% in private sector.
Yeah, no, I'm sure we're not there yet, but I'm just looking at the trajectory.
And again, we need to reach like 30. 35 if we're going to say we're powerful enough, because that's where we were in the 30s.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree we're not there now. But
in a three-way fight, we're in a three-way fight, and we need a third. We need a third of the country.
Sure. Yeah. So I don't know. Maybe civil war is the wrong framing of it, but.
Well, Civil War can have three sides. It's their assumption that it's
no. But I mean, yeah.
Well, look, let's define what Civil War is. So, like in the Gandhi movie, it points out like the partition of India into India and Pakistan, East and West, which eventually became Bangladesh.
Right.
This was done to prevent civil war. That unless they did this, there would be civil war. Now, even when they did it, there was still mass violence and unrest, riots where Hindus and Muslims were slaughtering each other at times, but fighting and rioting, counter rioting, back and forth in the major cities and other areas, but mostly the cities, I guess, and especially in the border areas where everybody was moving, because that's where it starts, and that wasn't defined as civil war because it was like for a month. And it wasn't against the government. They weren't fighting the government. They weren't trying to take control, because the partition was done so there wouldn't be Muslims trying to take the government or Hindus trying to take the government back from a Hindu minority ruling it, which was the Mughal Empire back in the day. But I'm not sure if this was a real story, but in the movie, Gandhi proposes a compromise where the Muslims hold the government first, or they get to appoint all the heads of departments. But as the Hindu leaders are like, this is that, as much as we would like that to work, our constituencies will not stand for that. They will riot and cause a civil war. They will mobilize against the government if it's Muslim run, even for the sake of the Muslims being afraid, because they are a minority. So the Muslim League says, we got to partition. It's the only way. So civil war was avoided, and there wasn't one. There was just a month or however long it was of terrible brother against brother, or rather violence against groups. And that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about a fear that every leftist, and by that I mean an actual like hard leftist, and actually every hard right-winger will be targeting each other and fighting each other.
See that I wouldn't see happening. I think,
and that's what
perhaps most
6%
realistically,
of the country. It's
right.
It's not enough to affect it, because if we were doing that, like in the last 5 years, where you have Proud Boy or alt-right versus Antifa, like it was no more than 50 on each side, and then the police would either break it up or let it go, or the police would back up the alt-right.
Right.
In the name of maintaining order, because one would be protesting peacefully and the other would be instigating by attempting to block them, attempting to do some active non-compliance. But notice all of that has stopped.
It would be hard.
Democrat in the White House, that all of that has stopped.
Right. That's has it all stopped?
For the most part.
There've been alt-right rallies recently, not on the scale that happened during Trump.
But we get psychotic stuff, right? Or we got the psychotic stuff. SWATed.
Yeah.
These are individual instances. There's no trend.
You're right.
It's a trend, but it's not like it's not a movement. It's not like
right.
And this is where why we laugh at him in the paranoia of it or whatever, the panic, the false panic, that he's wrong, because there's really like, this isn't as bad as he makes it sound. It's static. It's like the number of people involved.
Yeah, absolutely.
Call it civil war. I wouldn't even call it civil unrest, because our violence is not affecting anybody outside our social circles, online or off. But here's where BLM kind of goes on the level of civil unrest, because it actually burned businesses down, or it disrupted business as usual for a month. But only after 2 months of the pandemic disrupting everything. So you could actually call BLM all of that was just an extension of the pandemic disruption of a different character, but I'm just spitballing.
No, I mean, you're definitely right. It probably not have happened on that scale, if not the tension of the pandemic, and then just that one flashpoint.
People being bored and not working.
Cooped up and suppressed from just living their lives as normal.
Living their lives as normal. Yeah, okay. Sorry. I just, that phrase speaks of like Law and Order and like, just let me live my life. And like our way of life, meaning the way
Sure.
of life as destroying the planet. It's
Right.
That's my bias.
You're right. You're right.
Let me live my
But people
life.
still, right or wrong, people still feel that and feel tension because of that. There were big movements of people that protested because they couldn't get a haircut. They're not right. And
That wasn't a movement, though. That wasn't. I mean, well, I guess so, but the
it's
anti-masker,
small scale. It's a small scale movement.
But I can't tell you what the kind of dissonance I had when you had, I don't know if it was lefties or just leftist personalities, so they're just fake lefties, but they were like, we, or no, it was kooks, maybe even within the Green Party. They were saying, like, look, they were viewing the anti-lockdown protests as a populist grassroots response to the oppression and tyranny of the government, and that we need to be joining that, and why aren't we part of this? And this is the kind of movement that we should be collaborating with, or bringing on board and whatever. And we're like,
right.
Do you see the makeup of these events?
Yes,
they're all right. They're fascists.
It was mostly like small business owners,
or that's the petit bourgeois. Yeah, and it's like, this isn't our base, and we're not for them, and they're not us. And yeah, so those kooks are, I don't know if they're long gone. I don't think they are, but they haven't left the Greens because we haven't made it. The Greens have not made it. Shit.
They've not made it a priority to
they're not a priority. We have decided to not have an official position on vaccine mandates and masking and what have you.
That's unfortunate.
I think it would have forced them out, and I think we would have been better for it, even though it was more of a substantial minority than, say, the TERFs. So we can make sure the TERFs can split off, or the Jesse Ventura fans split off, or the Movement for People's Party can leave on their own accord. And that's how I know it's not a cult, because everyone's free to leave, and nobody cries if you do, and nobody wrangles you or coerces you into staying. It's always the people who want to stay. It's when people are totally being shown the door, but then they stay and say, no, I'm not going. I'm not going to be coerced out. I'm going to coerce you into doing what I want by not leaving. I'm gone. I'm not complying with your mask tyranny or vaccine tyranny.
Yeah.
But we avoided our own civil war by not an actual position.
That's kind of too bad, because I think you get a lot of those right libertarian hippie types that might be attracted into the Greens because they see eco and they're like, oh, I'm eco, I'm yeah, exactly. And at the end of the day, that ends up who they align with. They just want to have a spirituality attached to it.
Well, that's what we were seeing in the who I'm talking about. I see potential eco-fascists, people who are environmental, but that's all they are, or that, and they're anti-state or anti.
Right. But then they also have their own business that was propped up by their wealthy parents.
Yeah, and they'll be petit bourgeois in a way.
Yeah, exactly.
Bourgeois, or they're a type of hippie. So it's still a small business. It's a hippie business. It's still a small business,
and it's still run just like every other
bourgeois values.
Yeah,
and that's where the socialists no, we're going to be a socialist labor party, and that means these hippie bourgeois types are not really going to be welcome anymore, even though they're anti-war and they have all the other 7 out of the 10 planks, but those last 3 where we care about public welfare,
kind of critical,
and willing to use the state to do things. It's a tough knot. It's a Gordian knot of our own. Okay, so
we've hardly covered any of this video because Tim Pool is just so
it's
triggered.
It's
despite all the news, I'm feeling fairly optimistic that the extremes of the far left will not succeed. And then on the right, you have people like Trump. They call him a fascist, but he was unwilling to deploy the National Guard to protect cities from violent extremists during the Summer of Love, the 2020 riots.
Summer of Love.
Yeah, but did Tim Pool not see any of the footage from Minneapolis, St. Paul, where the National Guard literally was deployed and was patrolling streets, and their convoys of what the hell is he talking? This is just outright lies. They did.
Yeah, it didn't happen to him. It didn't happen to him.
Yeah,
I mean,
that has to be
I think
it.
at the time he would probably be saying like, "This is the National Guard being called in," but like they're on the defense. They're not being used offensively.
So they didn't go in and just
they need
wipe
to
out
be used-
entire blocks of protesters.
They need to be used to crush
Cool.
the uprising, not defend against it or something like that. I mean, he was like many voices just saying enough wasn't done. Essentially, but it's always going to be. It's never going to be enough until we're all in the death camp.
Yeah,
because as
far as
real fascists are concerned, that's when it's enough.
Yeah,
because that's what it meant to have the final solution. All other solutions were not enough, and only
even
genocide
that would be the end
enough.
of it. Yeah, then
it's the only way.
The problems.
Nuke them from orbit is the only way to be sure.
Sure. And in reality, if that ever happened where they got their wish, then lo and behold, the problems won't be solved. So they just find another point to divide and destroy. But
they didn't get that far, but they didn't have to be.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But it's interesting that, like, when in the movie Gandhi's asked, like, would you use the same tactic of nonviolent noncompliance against Hitler? How do you expect? Because he was, and this is why he spent most of World War II in jail. He was giving speeches, still preaching nonviolence, saying we shouldn't be fighting Hitler. We should resist him, of course, but nonviolently, because otherwise you're just creating the next monster, the Cold War, whatever. You're just perpetuating that state of affairs. And he would say, like, well, but what about like all the death? I'm not saying there wouldn't be many defeats, but eventually, noncompliance would force the Nazi war machine to a halt. There would just be many defeats, just as the Indian independence movement suffered many defeats, many massacres, and a lot of bludgeoned heads, including Gandhi's. But it always seemed to rally more people into joining his cause, his movement, with his strategy. And there was something that had to be enforced and preached, and lots of speeches, lots of teachings, and lots of press. And and his collective writings are extensive, because he was always writing. He's a lawyer. He's a writer.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. But getting back to what Tim Pool just said, does he also not remember when they were blackbagging people in Portland?
He probably, if he did, he covered it.
Department of Homeland Security? Like, was that not?
Doesn't factor in.
Yeah. Anyway, moving on.
And that says to me, Trump isn't the fascist here, and I'm not really worried about him being president. You can see people like Sam Harris.
Trump's not the fascist here, implying that one supposedly leftist person doing an act of stochastic terrorism makes the entire left fascist, as though the right hasn't been having that as a strategy since basically the end of the Vietnam War.
Well, let's not get ahead of ourselves. He's just making the really dumb case for why Trump isn't fascist, because he's incompetent and didn't actually wield any power. You can't look, Zach. You can't be a fascist if you don't actually have power, right? And if you have power, you're a fascist. If you don't have power, you're not a fascist. And by the way, I have a position that Trump, even as president, didn't have any power. That's why he didn't
have ultimate power, for sure. Yeah.
Well, no, he did. I don't think he had any power. He wasn't able to do anything. So that's why he was left with doing what he usually does, which is just grift. He could only do more grifts, but just with more influential people, like the Gulf monarchs, or on the global level. But he was still trying to grift people. But obviously, he was then around people who are rich enough that they aren't desperate enough to accept the deal or buy the grift. They didn't fall for it. No one would fall for it. And so he was left with nothing. He couldn't really do policy. He wasn't affecting the way Republicans acted. And that's why it's like it becomes his followers just see all Republicans now basically as rhinos, unless they talk and act just like Trump, meaning we can have political office, but that doesn't mean we actually have any power, because the liberals and the bourgeoisie actually have the power.
Mhm.
We're not them, even if we're
Yeah.
petite bourgeois.
True.
But again,
True.
they're a smaller faction, even though they'll type up like, 40% of America is small business.
Right.
True.
Yeah. Yeah. You make a good point again, and I think that ultimately is why his little coup attempt couldn't have worked, because the powers that be saw no benefit in not just continuing on with business as usual. So there's like, why would we back this guy and disrupt things and potentially put a dent in our profit?
Yeah.
So
because the major, like the Trump syndrome or the Trumper movement, is petite bourgeois who recognize, or at least feel in their gut, because it's true, that they don't actually have power in America anymore. They're certainly wealthy. They can buy a house, multiple houses.
They may have local power, but
they have local power, right?
Yeah.
They can control local politics, but they do not actually have power in this country or the world. And that's kind of why you have international capital versus local capital, and they don't have cultural power. No one respects them. Nobody they can have power in their locality, but no one likes them, and that's what kills them. They're not liked for their success. With their 5 car dealerships or whatever it is.
Right. Yeah. Interesting.
Recently in a podcast, Trigonometry, that Hunter Biden could have had dead children, the corpses of children, in his basement, and he wouldn't have cared. That is cult, authoritarian, totalitarian.
I don't want to spend a long time, but I just the whataboutism, throwing Hunter Biden into every fucking conversation, is just so ridiculous.
That's what they do.
He's not. He doesn't even have as much power as the Trump kids had, actually having positions in government. He's just a fail son who likes drugs and getting naked. Get over it.
It's an immature mind. It's an immature fallacy of just trying to find equivocations, regardless of what the topic is. They could be talking about desserts, and they'll be like, "Well, this dessert is just like that dessert because they both have bananas or something."
Right.
And that's what and so
they're both milk based. So
right. That's a better analogy, because banana is actually a taste, but milk is just an ingredient. So a milkshake and a tiramisu. Name something totally different than a milkshake, but uses milk.
Right.
A cream puff.
Mascarpone cheese.
Cheese, right? Yeah, cheese and milkshake. These things are both milk based. They're totally the same. Different. They're just as. What about the cheese? Zach?
Well, what about cheese? Yeah.
You threw this milkshake at me, but what about cheese?
I mean, a big enough block of cheese that might actually cause some brain damage. If you threw that at a
has to be
quote
a
unquote
cheese.
Reporter, it'd have to be a hard cheese.
What if it was a soft cheese? Lindbergh, you threw Lindbergh at me.
Oh no, some brie. No,
brie is the right one. Yeah. Oh, it's all gooey.
All right, moving on now.
That reminds me of Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs.
And I think we're going to beat it. I do. You can see how desperate they've become. While this story is breaking, we do have another story from the other day. 2 men convicted in a plot to kidnap Gretchen Whitmer. To Democrats, it's proof. The right is trying to start a civil war. To the right, the FBI basically...
Are even Democrats saying that? I guess some are.
I doubt it, but at least that's a little more relevant, trying to kidnap the governor of a state. A little more relevant. And kill a little more relevant, a little more on the road.
They weren't using the police to do it, though.
Right, with that too. They're not using the state to enforce their politics.
And swatting though isn't a political tactic. It was originally like a gamer prank.
Yes. So it started out with all those idiots who just went too far.
There's that category as well, to me. That it's a prank that's been adopted because there is a danger in doing it. There is a risk. It isn't harmless prank.
Right. No, it's malicious. It's more malicious mischief.
It isn't merely inconveniencing the event.
Right. Yeah. James trying to bring everything back to the pepperoni rolls. I'm telling you, James, my offer still stands. You subscribe to the channel, I will make you a custom pepperoni roll emote. So That's a little extra incentive
if you,
for you.
I have some extra pizza rolls. If you send me in $10, I'll
That's right.
send
That's
you a
right.
pizza roll. I figured out how to get a pizza roll on a floppy disk. So I'll just email me at Mr. Plinkett, and I'll send you a pizza roll.
Dan's a New Yorker, so it has the pepperoni roll, which is apparently different than a hot pocket or a pizza roll. Has that made it out to the Albany area?
Stromboli?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love Strombolis. Though we don't really have.
Yeah, basically it's Stromboli, isn't it?
Um,
How is this different than Stromboli, James? I demand
Smaller.
an answer.
I'm assuming smaller.
Yeah, I don't know. I've never had whatever pizza rolls.
I would eat them a lot in college, and technically they are sold by some of the pizza places around here, but not the one that's on my block or close. They're just pizza. So
pepperoni roll?
It's a pizza roll. No, I'm saying pizza roll, not pepperoni roll.
Pepperoni roll.
So when I eat your pepperoni roll, I'm thinking Stromboli because that's a roll with pepperoni in it.
Yeah.
And pizza toppings, but whatever.
Yeah. All right. Well, while we're waiting for a clear definition on that, let's move on with Dim Fool.
Planned the whole thing. It was effectively entrapment, maybe not even a real case to begin with. And it doesn't matter which side you're on or you believe, because either way, no matter which side you're on, left or right, and this is why I've said civil war for so long, no matter which side you're on, there's an instance, there is a circumstance driving us to a clash in this country. Another story that came out in the past few days.
What is it?
A man planted bombs.
He just moved on. So there's a force that's driving us to civil war.
Yeah.
Here's another instance of static violence.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and that's the thing. Is
and notice he's naming all the stories. I bet no one was actually ever heard.
Right.
He's not even talking about real murders or real violence. I mean potential violence that was either prevented or didn't happen.
Didn't actually go through.
Why doesn't he actually go for real crimes reports? Why does he doesn't, too lazy.
Well, too lazy, and it wouldn't prove his point.
What was wait, what? This is on his site.
Yeah, so he is streaming his own site. It appears. Because that's the level of production that we come to expect at the Timcast.
Not even using the Daily Mail anymore.
Yeah.
They're too biased. He's not left or right.
Yeah, you just can't get a good read on him anymore.
We now know to be fake in West Virginia. All of this is ramping up. And now you've got questions arising in the mainstream media. More and more, every single day, new articles. Is civil war coming?
Do you want to put one of those up on screen besides your own? Probably not.
And then I thought about it. Like I said,
I've seen them though.
Maybe I'm wrong.
I mean,
have you really
And they're usually inconclusive about what they're talking about.
Sure. You just said a vague. Well, people seem awful mad
Some
these days.
say.
Some are saying.
Some say we're moving towards civil war. I'm just asking questions.
That's right. I'm very big brain.
Wrong. Civil war implies people are fighting each other in the streets. And there's organized factions. And some have said, Tim, there's not going to be any organization. And I'm like, okay, maybe. But then you're looking at a Weimar Germany type situation and an eventual rise to power of one ideology.
He knows nothing about that, by the way. I mean, he knows cursory stuff. He knows basic, maybe Wikipedia article type shit.
Yeah, and like those beer hall brawls between the left and the right in Weimar Germany, those were not considered actions of civil war.
Well, it was street violence, and it was the Nazi Party attacking people or any leftist demonstration, and then they would report to their people, or they would canvass saying, "Look at how violent the left is, and they're going to kill you if they ever actually take full power, not just some seats."
Mm-hmm.
But again, I mean, in the last election that was held in 1932. Both them and the communists gained seats.
Right.
They gained a few more than the communists, but not by a lot.
Yeah.
But the point was that, the liberals, the conservatives, saw the fascists as partners to stop or to be a coalition with.
Yeah.
And they got backstabbed, and the Reichsmark fire was getting them, the conservatives, getting stabbed in the back.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Absolutely true.
Nobody had a majority, and that was kind of the problem. But and that's why the two-party system is so important to liberalism, is that it really prevents there from being an inconclusive government where it's unclear who is in charge, who is the majority. You have this issue in the parliamentary systems where you have really robust parliaments, where you have a multi-party, where it really is multi-party, like 6 parties. And especially when there's some lines being drawn where some parties will not form coalitions with others. And it becomes really unclear, or because of an election where everyone almost got like the same amount of votes or something of that nature, and the main major, like moderate party, just doesn't have enough partners to form a government. So you'll have like, well, let's see, what countries did this happen with? Was it Spain? Was it if you watch Reuters, like, you'll see stuff like this.
Yeah.
News of this type about how, like, for the 3rd year in a row, Italy couldn't form a government.
Sure.
And so major policy couldn't actually be implemented because, or any reform can't actually be done because there isn't a government. And so it's big news in Germany, whatever, when a party announces we'll form a coalition with these people as partners.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what the situation with German elections is kind of about. Who will the Christian Democrats form a coalition with? Will they go for the right-wing party, or will they actually choose to coalition with the Greens, for instance?
The Greens, yeah.
Or will the Greens stick to being in a left coalition with the Social Dems or with the Die Linke and whatever? Will they, break off from that block and join the Christian Democrats for the sake of having a department head, a Green, who will then turn the coal plants back on? Because of the gas shortage from Russia.
Right. Yeah. All right.
Could this become? Could become a revolution. And then you could see totalitarianism in any form take over. That's not civil war, but it's something similar. Let's read this story about Marjorie Taylor Greene getting swatted.
That's just it's just Hollywood.
Head over to timcast.com.
To Hollywood kind of like portrays just changes of government as being a revolution.
Yeah.
Sometimes it feels that way, where it's like it's a revolution. It's a revolution.
Right.
Or maybe it's just mass marketing, like Pepsi, it's a revolution.
Yeah. Yes.
It's watered down. It's really watered down terms. And that's Tim's little baby brain of using the most basic marketing definition of words. Like his vocabulary is based on marketing strategies. What was it meant when it was used on TV?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's no coincidence that every analogy he puts up almost always comes back to the MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, because that's basically his
what is a revolution more?
His depth of philosophy is what he sees in the Marvel movies.
Become a member to support our work. As a member, you'll get access to our exclusive Check them out. Their new song coming out.
I don't care.
We're gonna win.
He has gotten to
from Timcast.
Have you heard his new song that's out?
Yes. Revolution's bad because it's one government.
No, I think there's another one that he just came out with just even more recently than that.
Okay, then let's listen to that. Let's change. We've ranted about this enough. We've gone an hour.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. All right. Let's do that. Tim Pool. Let's find his new song. Sounds like Nickelback, except a lot less catchy. Is it Will of the People? That was a year ago. This is one day ago.
Well, the one where it's like, violence is bad. guys.
Yeah, no, but this is even another one.
Tim Pool
I don't want no.
has
no
new music
majority
out.
for it.
All right. Well, let's see if they actually link to it though.
Yeah. Okay.
Majority app. All right. I at least want to hear what it's called so we can search by
The
title.
Stylings of Dashboard Confessional. What's his band's name?
It's Timcast, I think.
It's Timcat. Well,
No way.
the consistency of the branding is unparalleled.
But like, just for the YouTube description, like literally the title where the artist usually is Timcast, and the channel is Timcast Records.
I really want it on.
Self-starter.
I don't want it with their
Let's see.
interruptions though. It's got to be with their interruptions.
Here we go. All right, let's see if we can at least see the title though.
Oh yeah, I get you.
You might have to skip into it a little bit. You just want to hit forward about 10 seconds?
Who is this?
Just some guy.
Shoot. Well, that's not coming up with the results I wanted.
Guy. Tim Pool. Did you put it in Tim Pool's song? No,
Yeah,
no.
Tim
Come
Pool's.
on. Put in like new album.
New song or new album?
Music video. Or music video.
Only Ever Wanted. I think this is it. Yeah, Timcast Records. Here we go. Here we go.
Watch it not have a political message.
No, I believe it does. I've heard people go through this.
Well, that's right. He wants to make culture, political culture.
So a guy walking into a house. Looks dirty.
Did you think I'd leave you there? Did you think I'd never keep my promise to? It's easy when I'm lying there with you, and every night I dream of you, and every night I promise to hold on to the dream I one day wake up next to you. Did you know you left me there, staring at the heartache in my soul, as I fell to pieces into the one you're leaving for?
I think this is just
There's
that.
only one thing I want you to know, is that I have found my peace here. I'd walk away. Did you think I'd break my promise? Not today. It's easy when I'm standing there with to stay.
I like these pepperoni. Where's seatbelt kids?
Yeah. So much production for such shitty music. I'd be embarrassed to be the graphic designer on this. That was so yeah, I guess it was not even political.
I do like the backwards guitar effect,
Yeah, it's interesting.
which I've heard in many other ways, but there was this artist Mod Wheel Moon that used it, but obviously he was like 10 times better than that. So
Yeah. It just sounds like some generic early aughts.
that's the comparison to Nickelback.
Emo. Yeah.
Right, emo, which ironically is emo stands for emotion, and yet it's actually means that you actually lack any emotion or emoting. Which is why I just couldn't stand that trend. And I was actually a teen.
Yeah, I never really got
That was
into
when
it.
I was actually a teen. That was supposed to be my trend. And I'm like, so it's like goth, but like less emotion? Why? It's like you're that dead and like the aughts, like the Iraq war. No, it wasn't about Iraq.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, the times make you that dead inside, huh? But it was always like people who like, what do you really have to be sad about right now? I mean, you could be depressed about various things. You could have family problems, whatever. But it was always something personal. It wasn't like the world or
no.
It was just like, I think it's it's based off of an innate narcissism that's at work. But yeah, that's a hot take.
Yeah.
Emos are just narcissists.
For the most part, yeah, it is. It's more a lifestyle trend that came and went more than anything.
Yeah, people grew out of it as they matured. Is the simple as that.
Kind of like glam punk, I would almost, but not even with as much to it.
I mean, all of those types of flash trends are teenagers who are to use a trope, think the world's all about them or revolve around them, and either they go to college or some other type into the world, and they grow out of it, so they mature and their brain is fully developed, or they do something. Maybe it's too much early drugs or something. Maybe something about their life, like they're rich. They don't grow out of it, and they just go to the next trend and the next trend and the next trend.
Love the lyrics. These are the most boring lyrics. Did you think I'd ever leave you there? Yeah, here. Did you think I'd ever keep my promise to you? It's easy when I'm lying there with you, and every night I dream of you, and every night I promise to hold on to you. The dream I'll one day wake up next to you. Did you know you left me there, staring at the heartache in my soul as I fell to pieces, and to the one you're leaving for? That I don't think there's like a 3-syllable word in any of these. Did you think I'd walk away?
Leave me.
Did you think I'd break my promise? Not today. It's easy when I'm standing there with you, yet every day away from you is another day I break my promise to hold on, because holding on is harder than I knew. Did you know? It's
was there actually boring. A line about the other guy or another guy?
No, this is like just the most basic sketch of a love song.
Yeah,
about heartache. Why did this person leave? Why are you not together? Why are you holding on? Was that car crash supposed to be it? Like he was in love with someone who had a car accident and died?
Well, first of all,
because he says now you can rest in peace. No, yeah, that's right.
Don't have anything to do with the song. So
that's absolutely true. Yeah,
music videos can just be cool of their own right, but
I only ever wanted you to stay. I only ever needed you. I only ever wanted you to stay. I only ever needed you. I only ever needed you. Did you know that I left you there? Like,
I lots of I statements. So obviously, at least they're learning from therapy that to use I statements in the healing process.
That's so bad. I almost just want to watch his other terrible political.
Yeah, let's watch the other one where you think you're just as bad as them when you do counter violence, which is it's interesting that like it's the milquetoastness. It's weird that like kind of you'd think he would talk Gandhi more often, or like Gandhi's really the political figure that we should emulate.
Yeah, but him and MLK. They're like,
do that because. Right. Well,
just say stuff, but don't really do anything, and that's how you change things. You just get together.
MLK,
and you say,
MLK, standard democratic socialist, but Gandhi, actual communist. So you can't really do that. I mean, you can do that on a surface level for Gandhi, but it's not just the nonviolence. That's also the baby brain superficiality of like MLK and Gandhi were just. They were about nonviolent political action. Okay, but what kind of action? because there's a scene that was actually pretty poignant. I want to like maybe grab it. It's Gandhi and the other leaders of the Congress Party, because Gandhi is one of them. And they're discussing like what to do about this, what their response will be. And, you know, they're spitballing the standard kind of ideas of what political campaign, SWATed, the Muslim party, the Muslim of the group, says like, we need to do direct action. And that's read as terrorism or, you know, breaking windows. But Gandhi says like, no, yeah, we will, you know, do direct action. But we're going to call for, you know, we're going to call for non-compliance, active non-compliance, or not active, but passive non-compliance, or active
non-compliance.
Yeah. No, well, passive non-compliance is apathy, basically, because they actually use the words like, we want to rouse people from apathy as well as being terrorists. Because to him it's true, they're just as bad. But it's like, no, I'm going to call for, you know, they can't do anything without us. So we're going to like, and basically the guy goes like, so you're calling for a general strike? I'm like, no, we call for a day of fasting and prayer. And it's like, oh, no. He suggests that. It's like, wait, you mean a general strike? I'm like, no, it's going to be a day of fasting and prayer.
I got you.
So the strike is illegal.
Sure.
Prayer and fasting is not
illegal.
But if everyone does it, then the government shuts down for the day.
Very good. That's clever.
So it was one and the same, and his strategy of, you know, nonviolent is a general strike is nonviolent. A picket is nonviolent.
Yes.
But it's violence to the owners, and you need to provoke a response, you know, and that's kind of what's happening on a small scale with the two nonprofits, or at least one in particular. Capital Roots, they own a bunch of gardens. Their staff have just unionized. And after a lot of tension happening, the management, and then also part of the tension is where the line is between management and non-management.
For sure.
Because like when you have like the volunteer coordinator get fired for insubordination, like he's the person who's managing others, but then he gets fired for doing his job well, you know. Anyway, the insubordination was like he did one thing in preparation for a fundraiser gala, which the new union, because they're in contract negotiations, they're going to picket the fundraiser. Just picket it. They're not blocking it. They're not whatever. But they're let the vendors for the event, the fundraiser, it's a gala, know that they're going to picket it with no other direction, at least on their end. They're not saying, we didn't say, you know, don't support the gala because this is one of their fundraisers. But some of the vendors pulled out. In their minds, probably as a show of solidarity with the union. They're like joining the picket, so to speak. And the management have told the press that the union threatened them. Threatened that if they didn't pull out of the event, that they would, I don't know, suffer the consequences or something, or that they would be picketed. You know, canceled. They'll be canceled. It's cancel culture run amok. They didn't use those words, but it felt like it. So anyway, sorry.
Okay. Yeah.
Will of the people. Yeah. It's the will of the people. You say it's the will when you kill people you don't like, and that's all there is to it. You don't like them. You don't like the car owner, the car dealership that, you know, exploits people with every car loan. You know, it's because you don't like them. And they like Trump, and you don't like that. They disagree.
You don't like that. That's the only reason you're doing it.
They disagree. That's all it is. A big disagreement. When people get evicted,
they just can't use their words.
They're homeless. When the people are homeless, it's and they can't find good work in Ohio. It's just disagreement.
Yeah, just use your words, guys. Come on. I just do want to bring up, though, we're coming up on the 9 o'clock hour for me. So it's probably going to either be this video or your last video that you wanted to take a look at, and that's probably all I'll have time for tonight. The other one was the taking down Biden's State of the Union speech from Matthew Hall.
I think we only have. Let's just do Tim Pool, and then we'll be done.
So save that for the next time. Okay.
Yeah, sure. Be more Green Party stuff. Try to find other things. I don't like slow.
Yeah, maybe we can even speed it up.
Yeah, let's do that.
No reason we have to listen to it at normal speed. This actually has some pep to it now. Look at that.
On a march in the morning, he called his soldiers down to take aim at the traitors, to gun those rebels down. Now they face the consequences. They held themselves above. This is the will of the people. He said, I wish I could spare them, make them see the path. Tempting as that sounds, allowed to pass. I know what's needed for the good of my people, to save them. Out in the dark, without warning, he raised his fist above. Let it cry to his people, to tear those statues down. Now they'll face the consequences. They held themselves above. This is the will of the people. He said, I wish I could spare them, make them see the path. Tempting as that sounds, allowed to pass. I know what's needed for the good of my people, to save them. Drop your arms and march for them. Turn against the wall, then bow your head. Speak your last words, let them be said. On the march in the morning, he called his comrades down to take aim at the traitors, to gun those fascists down. Now they face the consequences. They held themselves above. This is the will of the people. He said, I wish I could find it, the way to restore peace. Lasted for those days we held in pain. I give it all for a chance at redemption, as the cycle turns again. See it before, now you see it begin. You've seen the changes and the blood pulling. If you think it ends here, think again.
Oh God. My favorite part is how there's absolutely no solution proposed in any of that. It's just
Well, that's not usually what music does,
yeah.
unless it's an IWW song about forming one big union. But
Right. But it's
that's
it's
a
just-
very
don't protest, don't overthrow things, because you absolutely will just become the thing that you hate. There's
the next
no
dictator.
alternative. It always goes that way. It's an incredibly ahistorical
It's capitalist
reading of
realism.
things.
Well, the only thing that's freeing is market economics or something like that. So it's like
Yes.
if there's no government to do the raid, then that's freedom. There's no government.
Yeah.
Because if there is a government, it's going to be tyrannical,
It just has to be. Has to be. Yeah.
so to speak. At least that's a straw man of it. But the yeah, because that's why that's why Castro was killed by his own people.
Right.
And
Uh,
so the real counter to this is not some mumbo jumbo like political science argument, conceptual thing. To me, what makes kind of say the communist position not this is that when communists took power, and let's say not always, they didn't get the chance to kill the last dictator, but let's say they did kill those that committed war crimes under the last regime. And it was always usually those that committed the war crimes, no one else, like in Cuba. And I'm
Exactly, yeah.
and I'm thinking of particular new regimes, Castro regime, but really they weren't just regimes. You can call them that, but governments, because there are elections and shit.
Absolutely.
But, and that even goes for DPRK. But the people they replaced were worse. And
unquestionably,
it's a leftist regime, they're better.
Yeah.
And they are doing less repression. And they are not just doing the no-knock raid on the dissenters of any kind. And you have all of these leftist leaders who are heads of government, revolutionaries. Some of them are even elected heads of state now, by the way. One in there's Colombia, and there's what was the other one? I guess it was Colombia was the recent one. But
Colombia was the recent one.
Chile was a former revolutionary or current. You have these people who are being elected, so they're gaining power the right way. But not just but that's pink tide, that's red tide, pink tide stuff. I'm talking those who took absolute power. Let's say they actually overthrew bourgeois power and replaced it with some type of labor power. The leaders, let's say I'm going to name them off: Castro, Ho Chi Minh, the Kims, or particularly Kim Il Sung. These were not gunned down by a new insurgency that rose up against
that too.
They died in their sleep. Old men loved by most. And I say most because not absolute.
There's no absolutes for sure.
And if there were armed insurgencies or rioters, guess who's usually funding or instigating? The CIA.
Absolutely.
Or at the very least, there's a propriety that they're backed by the CIA because they are there. And if they weren't, then if there is, it would make opposition more legitimate. So you maybe actually have opposition in some countries where it's like, get out of here, CIA, you're making us look illegitimate. And the government gets to say we're illegitimate because of American involvement. Because guess what? America, not so popular here in the third world. And that goes for African governments, Angola, because there wasn't a singular head man in the Angola revolution, but that was a long, bloody civil war. And that's the thing with Africa. They had long civil wars with leftists basically winning. And maybe they're not just as bad, but they're in a position where maybe it's decolonializing, but they're still shackled to European debt and whatever, and they're even less developed than Cuba and Vietnam or whatever, or just things aren't good. There's no civil society because at least Castro and Ho Chi Minh, these were trained, educated lawyers. Same with Gandhi, all lawyers. So it's funny, right? Don't trust some lawyers. Lawyers get into politics, but there's the good examples too. And the Kims, they all die old, and people weep for them. Let's say it's all fake, but the funeral. But it's also there really were that unpopular, like in the music video. What is this cycle? This cycle is actually a fiction, unless we're talking about. I guess there are recent times where it seems like that's the case, like with maybe Syria, where if Assad was overthrown, it would be a worse government. It would be fascist. Even though the opposition there were actually liberals. Or let's say in Egypt with the Arab Spring, where the Muslim Brotherhood, at least in American press, perhaps, were portrayed as being worse.
Sure.
Or that things in Egypt were unstable and economically bad, but that's because American support wasn't forthcoming, and what have you. And but the government really didn't change. It wasn't a full revolution. It was just a change in government. But the military put themselves back in charge. They did a counter revolution, so it didn't last. Didn't get the chance. Mostly because the Muslim Brotherhood wasn't really strong enough to replace the military. They were just who was around that could have formed a government, because all of the opposition that was like, and this is the thing where revolting isn't enough. It's funny that Tim Pool and his, in the fantasy, it's not just Tim Pool's fantasy, but it's the liberal fantasy of how revolutions occur, that there's a protest and then the leader emerges from it. It's the opposite. A leader emerges, they organize the protest. So in the video, it shows that the guy, who replaces the dictator becomes the new dictator through a long life of being the politician and being in organizing or doing politics. It shows the local career, after being in a protest. As if the protest itself, once you kill the dictator, now the government's changed and now you can be the new politician.
Right.
That's not how it works. That's not how it is. And that's why it seems like if you kill the dictator, there's a power vacuum, and then something comes in that's either the worst or it's just the underlings of the dictator. Yeah, and that's kind of why we gotta cut off the ruling class or eliminate them or imprison.
Yeah.
But usually, when
or
it's Cuba, they all
redistribute
run
all their
away.
land. Yeah. Yeah.
But the thing is, you give them the chance,
flag.
they all run away. They leave. They run to the imperialist powers and say, "Oh, we've and grave injustice has been done against us. They stole our plantations."
Which, I mean, considering how long Cuba has lasted, maybe that's the best way to do it of all. Just let them go.
Let them go. As they said in the 90s, let the scum leave.
Yeah.
So we'll say with traitors, we're not going to like them after them, but they can leave. We'll like them for it. Something like that with Soviet Union. A lot of gold reserves were taken out of the country from rich Russian families that then became expats in the rest of Europe.
Yeah.
As seen in the movie Anastasia by DreamWorks.
Yeah.
where the Empress Dowager is living it up in Paris. With wealth,
incredibly accurate.
That's her wealth and not the Russian people's.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's nothing to do with them. She got it all herself through her hard work. I wonder if Tim just based that entire concept on that Game of Thrones speech where Daenerys is just it's just a wheel of power, and you have the Targaryens on top, and then you have the whatever
Stark.
the Stark people on top. I want to break the wheel. Is that really what the solution he's implying is? Just stop revolting?
Well, breaking the wheel is like smashing the state and but nothing else, and leaving capital and markets in place.
Yeah, I guess so.
Not how that works.
No. I don't know.
Yeah.
A really horrible.
He may have taken it from recent media, but the idea that revolution is always just replacing one bad guy with another.
Oh no, that's definitely not true.
Old, and it's just liberal propaganda. One of my least favorite episodes of the original Twilight Zone is called The Mirror. Have you seen this one? It's basically I call it the Castro episode. So you basically have a guy. I'm gonna summarize it for you, and then we'll call it a night. So Twilight Zone, standard Sterling, for your consideration, a man who is worked by the sweat of his brow and is an oppressed man. What's his frickin' name? Anyway, this guy and his 4 lieutenants have taken the government, and there's the former dictator. It's take him out and shoot him. Let's be done with you. You're done. You've and he's just you're gonna miss, and he gives a type of speech of like, you're just gonna be just like me, and so it is, once you're in power, once you have that seat, sit in that chair, you're gonna be, it's gonna look pretty, you're gonna be pretty different. I can see that mirror over there. That mirror shows you your true enemy, and
Oh,
so
Peter Falk is in. Oh, nice.
Huh?
I'm just looking at the episode. Peter Falk is in it. That's cool.
So one by one throughout the episode, his 4 lieutenants, he sees in the mirror, as he's looking in the mirror, he sees one of them like trying to kill him, stab him in the back with a gun or something like that. And he just like turns and he goes like, and then the next like, and it's just like he has no reason to think they're actually doing that, because he turns around and they're just toasting him or whatever, or just chatting or just talking about, governing. But then it's just like he has this look of like paranoia, and in the next scene he'll be ordering their execution. And so over the episode, he's killed his lieutenants, his friends, which, by the way, each of them represents a different kind of revolutionary. Like one's like a Che type, the other is like an intellectual, one's a firebrand, and the other is, I forget the third, a veteran, I guess. And it's a good episode for like, this is what liberal propaganda looks like. This happened in Cuba, but this was when Castro was just gotten the power, so it's like this is what it looked like to them.
It's funny that it happened not at all that way.
Right. And it's kind of it's fiction, but I mean, it's sci-fi.
Yeah.
It's like, this is the way liberals think about popular revolutions. That it's just like the power gets to their head immediately, and there's no people power or democracy happening whatsoever. Anyway, so it ends with him like looking in the mirror, and I guess he sees he's the enemy, so he jumps out the window, or he jumps off the balcony. In the episode, he was being, cheered and whatever. Clemente, his name's the name of the characters is Clemente. And he also had like satires. I think literally like, there was or Banana Republic, stuff like the Banana Republic. It's like Cuba, it's just a Banana Republic, so you just replace one tyrant with another.
Sure.
Okay.
All right.
Fashion on Rod Sterling. But actually, the thing about the Twilight Zone was that he actually wanted more leftist stuff, but the network wouldn't allow it. They had to go right surprising. Up. They really tried to push as most as they could. Certain episodes, you can tell this is the one they were trying to push for something, an actual leftist message or progressive message, like Color Me Black or something like that.
Cool.
Or the Star Trek episode that's like racism.
Oh yes, the half black, half white. Yeah, the classic. All right. So what is going on with the Three Left show these days?
I should probably, my current plate is making new logos so I can kind of fib up the site a bit, change up the branding, of course, and the site. I need to. Is that what it looks like right now? Oh, okay.
That's what's coming up. So it looks like you still got the A2 building and renting.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, that's the last episode. I didn't know that was the picture. Oh, yeah, no, yeah, that's the picture I put with it. Yeah, okay, never mind. I did choose that picture because I was like, that's my politics and Albany picture.
Nice.
With me, because I couldn't decide what kind of picture to put there. I'm off and on making episodes. I attempted to make one where I interviewed my comrade Canyon, who's through happenstance become the director of the basically housing rights nonprofit, tenants rights nonprofit, and he has started tenant organizing, where New York City has a century of tenant organizing, at least, probably going back farther. But there's a reason half of the buildings in New York are co-ops, or most buildings have some tenant association. It's just normal for there to be a tenant association. Albany doesn't have any of that. We have zero. We're working with zero. So we're about to have the first two. And from there, he will keep doing that. particularly where there are actual slumlords things. But what is the trend is that you have slumlords who are then selling their property to a larger corporate entity, and they're like cleaning house of poor tenants, kicking people out and whatever, because they are going to take the same housing and then charge market rates for it. Because let's say the slumlord is at least accepting Section 8, or he's exploiting Section 8 recipients, because you get, the government is subsidizing the rent, so it's guaranteed rent.
Mm-hmm.
And that if you raise it, the government will fill the gap up to a point. So you can. I worked with a guy who, this was the moment I didn't want to work with him anymore. Really, I think I give him another week. But he said, like, we can sell this, we can rent this apartment to a refugee family, and the government will pay us $900 a month. Like, they give them $900 a month for rent,
Mm-hmm.
and we can charge that much. We can get that. And I'm like, why don't we charge $400, and then the family gets to keep the other $400, because that's the good thing to do.
Yeah.
And the fact that he didn't think in those terms, or that they only supply what the rent is, but that's like, we're going to exploit that loophole or state to fund us. And I'm like, that's real shady. And the fact that it's like, it'll be a refugee family. Like, well, there's
so they already
100
unfamiliar
families on the block that would want cheaper rent. Maybe we should be thinking of them.
Yeah.
Since we're trying to do in-community stuff. Because we're not building community if we're just bringing in refugees or people, immigrant populations, and renting to them particularly, instead of the people who have always been there, and are about to be homeless, or people who are already homeless, but maybe they could afford $400, but they can't afford $600, and the cheapest place is $600. And mind you, this was like an attic apartment flat. It was like nothing, and he was talking about having a whole family in there. Like, I would not want more than one person. Anyway, ancient history. Good night, Zach. Thanks for doing this again. We'll keep
absolutely.
Always great to do this.
Always a pleasure.
Every 2 weeks. I will see about showing up on any of the other days this week. Just share that link in the green room.
For sure. All right. We'll talk to you next. All right. Have a good night, Dan. See you next time. All right. Well, I think that's going to do it for tonight. It is past bedtime for me, so I'm going to sign off. See you tomorrow night for more of People's History of the United States. Right back here at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. And pretty soon I'll be having the video out for our recent leftist karaoke night. Didn't get as many people singing as I would have liked. It was just me and Trisha. But we had a very supportive audience, and it was still a fun time. So I'm still going to release the video. So look for that coming out soon on my YouTube page. Otherwise, see y'all tomorrow night.